The Theology Experience.
Transform our perspectives. Father, bless our work and all of those affected. We see the difference with the righteous and wicked, between the one who serves God and he who's not submitted. The experience. The theology experience. Theology. The theology. Take note and listen as we speak to one another. On. Theology experience.
Hello. Welcome to the Theology Experience, where my goal is to embody and encourage experiencing theology through long-form, open dialogue. I'm your host, Trey Brickley, and today we are experiencing theology through a special Theology Today segment, Artemis II and Biblical Cosmology. Today's guest is Sean Griffin, creator of Kingdom in Context, the guest for episode 7 of the Theology Experience, and a well-known proponent of a non-modern cosmology, which he, of course, considers to be biblical cosmology. Sean, welcome. Glad to have you.
Hello. Thanks for having me, brother. I appreciate you. Nice to see you again, Trey.
You too, brother. Well, so for anyone who may not be familiar with you that's tagging in for the first time to the channel, or at least having you on the channel, please go ahead and just speak a little bit more to your work over at Kingdom in Context.
Yeah. Kingdom in Context, we try to focus on the gospel of the kingdom. We feel like that is more literal than allegorical, that a physical kingdom is going to descend through a physical firmament. The Father's house, Ezekiel 37, Revelation 21, will actually descend and be the promised land between the Euphrates and the Nile promised Abraham. This is the place that Christ went to go prepare for us, as he explains in John 14. The place that Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5 is a building reserved in heaven for us. So I think that it's a literal thing, and we're going to go through a lot of historical information as well as scriptural citation that will speak to how literal and physical that is, and it does not match the reality that we've been told. And so what we try to focus on at Kingdom of Context is just keeping the Bible in context. So that means oftentimes you have to define your terms. You have to look for surrounding details. You do have to become familiar with figures of speech from a current culture, or even translation concepts. But I think as we go through this stuff today, you'll see it takes more effort to allegorize or metaphorize or claim doctrinal accommodation than it does to just take it for what it says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm eager to learn with you and from you on this topic. And excited to dialogue with you because, as I'm sure many who are following the show will know, there was a recent NASA mission, Artemis II, that brings to the forefront these questions about biblical cosmology. What does the Bible say? What doesn't it say? And so, Sean, in episode 7, you and I actually briefly discussed this. And for the sake of the audience who may tune into this and to kind of prime the pumps for everyone, I want to go ahead and play that segment of the episode at an increased speed. And after that, we can move forward with your description of biblical cosmology, diving deeper into the foundations of that description, addressing a couple objections, and then talking specifically about Artemis II and what that model and what your model implies about it. So, as long as that sounds good, let's go ahead and get to it.
Sounds great.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to take a look at that portion of the video. So here we go. Hopefully people don't mind it being sped up a little bit so that we can save time. Here we go.
Trey, are we supposed to be able to hear it?
Uh-oh. Are you not hearing it?
No, I can't hear anything.
You can see it though, right?
I see it. It's pretty choppy, but I definitely see it.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and give it one more try. If it doesn't work, I'll just give a rundown by word of mouth here. All right, here we go. Let's try one more time. All right, backing it up.
What you just said and what you just introduced us to there is a perfect
You got it?
You can hear it now, yeah.
Okay, good. Here we go.
segue into the questions of biblical cosmology. So I feel like now would probably be a good time to start down that road. So I'll just note that this is not something I have pretty much ever really questioned, thought about. Like many people, I just grew up, went to school, read the books, watched the movies, played the games, and I'm like, well, of course, this is a globe, and space is a thing, and there's other galaxies and all this kind of stuff, right? And then recently I was introduced to a couple people who have made an effort to discuss these issues, ask the questions, deal with the biblical texts, deal with the scientific data that's available to us, and have come to the conclusion, such as you, that the narrative that we've been handed and been fed is not correct. And again, I gotta say, I've not really thought about this. I find from what I've surveyed from you in particular, there's not really anywhere else that I've gone to dig deep into this question of cosmology and the shape of the earth and the nature of the quote-unquote universe or all that. But from what I've been able to survey from you so far, I have to say that I appreciate your emphasis on the scriptures and what the scriptures say about the issue and what they quite clearly suggest is the case about this reality that we live in. I feel like that's, for those of us who accept the truth of the biblical story all the way from the beginning through Jesus to the end, I mean, that's got to be our first place to go, because we believe that these scriptures are God's revelation to us. So we've got to take what they say about whatever topic we want to think about seriously. And then I've also noticed that in addition to that sound, sober, scriptural focus of yours, you've done your homework on trying to engage with the best that modern science has to offer that is leveraged against your particular view. Okay, so with all that said, I mean, just introduce us to your view here. What's the problem? What's the solution? And let's go from there.
We don't live in a ball in space. We live in a structure. It's called a firmament. And the layers of structure that are enclosing us above us, in Genesis 1, verse 8, that structure called a firmament was given the name heaven. Trey, can you see? Imagine a 7-story building, and we're on ground floor 1.
I'm sorry.
There's 6 layers above us,
Mhm.
and there's 2 basements. There's
Sorry to interrupt
you, but the live chat can't see anything. I can't see anything. We can hear the
Weird.
audio, but you can't see the actual.
Well, sorry
video.
about that, guys.
It's okay.
Just a second. I'm not sure why it's giving me such troubles. I've done this before successfully. Okay, you know what? This is giving me too many technical issues, so I'm just going to go ahead and nix this part of it. So look, here's what happened. I told you I'm not very familiar with the subject. I don't really have much of an opinion, but I'm open to the possibility of the modern account being incorrect and want to learn from and with you about biblical cosmology. Because really, at the end of that little segment there on our episode 7 of the Theology Experience, I said, what matters is everyone has a theology, everyone has a cosmology, everyone has a soteriology, an eschatology, etc. So what matters is what's the true cosmology. And obviously, you and I share an affirmation of the Bible as our primary source of authority, even on a question like that. What is the true cosmology? And so again, what we want to discuss here is, what does the Bible say? What doesn't it say about cosmology? And so, Sean, with that said, I'd like you to go ahead and take the reins. Give us a description of biblical cosmology from your perspective as deeply as you'd like, and I'll just probe with questions and comments here and there.
Sure. Yeah. So just to start with, I like what you said, right? Everyone has a theology, soteriology, cosmology. I would say most people are force fed those categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where they grew up and which religious institution. Okay. Everyone has an afterlife theology. Oftentimes it doesn't match Luke 16 or what the early church fathers taught. What modern day churches will teach you that you go straight to heaven when you die. That's not what anybody thought until like the days of Augustine, right? So other people will talk about soteriology. Well, that has morphed greatly and been argued about infinitum, right?
Mhm.
Even getting worse once the reformers showed up with all the, which is where the OSAS doctrine, the free grace doctrine, sprang forward from, to which we still would deal with today. So they emphatically claim a type of soteriology that is completely incompatible to Catholics and Orthodox. That I would say the Catholics and Orthodox sociology, which involves sacraments, are incompatible with what Christ taught, right? So ultimately, people, the average person, is force fed those categories, including cosmology. But once they start researching these things for themselves and reading the Bible for themselves, they start to form their own ideas on this stuff. So that's what I did. 2015, I came to the understanding that I heard some people talking about biblical cosmology, specifically the idea of the firmaments, and I went and looked up the term firmaments, and lo and behold, like I've been studying. Like, this is 2015, so I've been studying the Bible since 1997 at that point, and I wanted to like punch myself in the face because I thought, how could I, for this long, 18 years, how could I have overlooked the definition of this word?
Mm.
And I did so because I was already force fed a cosmology, and I thought I already had that understood in my brain. So then every time I read Genesis 1, I'm thinking about a heliocentric sphere in space amongst stars and nebulas and, other planets. That's what I was trying to force the lens of reading Genesis 1 through, instead of the actual definitions of the words. And so it took me about a week after my stomach was upset
Mm.
because the cog disc was super strong. And I actually got a sick stomach because I was like, oh my goodness, how did I? For one, I was embarrassed. And two, I was like, what does this mean? What are the social ramifications of me taking the definition of this word seriously? Because what? Like, this is describing like a dome over a flat earth. Like, so where'd space go? So we can get into all those
Exactly.
details.
Yeah.
And that's where it took me about a week before I had to come settle it within my own heart and mind of like, okay, this is actually what it says. So what happens then? Because this is the way I deal with scripture in a way. Okay. So if I'm have two competing ideas, like say if I'm working with two different atonement theories, well, then I'll play both of those theories out on a course and see which one is more logical, which one lines up with scriptural more. So I try to run the tape through on both competing theories. And when I did this with the firmament, I was like, oh my goodness, it just makes everything make so much more sense. Everything,
Mm.
the second coming of Christ, the New Jerusalem, the concept, Joshua chapter 10, the battle of the Amorites and the fire, the hail falling from heaven, like all kinds of things. Just suddenly the flood itself, it just made so much more sense. And
Mm.
it caused me to be more confident in what the Bible says. And then I started to realize all of the deception that had gone into how I didn't believe that and what I was taught that was contrary to that. And so we can talk about it for sure. And if you want me to
Yeah.
share my
Yeah.
screen?
Yes, do. Go ahead.
Okay. So where did it go? Let's
While
see.
you're pulling that up, I'll just give some love to the chat. Mark, good to see you. Tyler, Shalom. R.A. Tacky, Bible says Earth is flat. Tracy Inches, Shalom from under the seven domes. Refining Exegetics, good to see you. Good to see all of you. Shane. Yeah, thanks for the comments, y'all. Daniel, good to see you. All right.
Okay.
Just go ahead and let me know. I'm seeing your share. Everybody in the chat, let me know if you can see Sean's screen right now, his
Okay.
presentation.
So we just want to start simple stuff. Okay. Genesis 1, 6 through 8. This is the day 2 of creation. God said, let there be an expanse between the waters to separate the waters from the waters. So God made the expanse and separated the waters beneath it from the waters above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky. There was evening, there was morning, the second day. Now, Troy, a lot of people will say, look, it's just called the sky. It's just where the clouds are. That's all it is. But actually, this is a very, modern translation.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you go into the KJV, it says God called the firmament heaven.
Mhm.
Okay. And so this is why it says this, and this word expanse is the word that is translated from the Greek stereoma by most. And I don't know why they do this. You would think because it's Genesis, they would want to translate it from the Hebrew rakia, but instead, uh, they, for whatever reason, use the lexiconical English translation from the stereoma Greek, which is an expanse. But still, by definition, it's a solid expanse, right? It's not just meaning an open, vast void of air. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not saying expansive with no barrier or container. It's literally from the Greek word stereoma, which means a solid extended surface. Now, the Hebrew word rakia is a word that also means an arched vaulted dome of heaven, a solid extended surface, whom the Hebrews regarded as solid and arched like a vault. And that's the word rakia, which then translates into the Latin. It's the firmamenta. That's where we get the word firmament in like the KJV translation. So,
Understood.
so between the Hebrew, you got rakia, the Latin is firmamenta, and the Greek is stereoma. That's what will be either called the firmament or the expanse in these passages. Okay.
And some
So
translations will just go straight for dome. Like I've seen that before.
yeah, but that's when you get further into scripture, right?
Mhm.
They rarely do that in Genesis for some reason. Okay. They'll do
Yeah.
that in the book of Amos, which makes perfect sense, by the way. So the scholars were smart enough to realize that's what it was talking about. But for here, they get so wonky here with this very vague generic translation of sky. But the word sky is a replacement English word for the Hebrew word shomayim, which is this
Right.
word for heaven, right? Which
It's more
by
than that. It's heavens, plural.
plural heavens, and
Mhm.
specifically by literal definition, it's a covering of waters.
Mhm.
So that's going to come up later. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but that's exactly what it is in the description of the action that's taking place in this passage is there's a solid structure that's an extended surface separating, like being slid between a bulk body of water to create two separated bodies of water.
That's the key point right there, because look, it says God made this object, which is translated here as
Yeah,
expanse in Hebrew, it's rakia, and this object separates waters above and waters below. And
that's right.
it seems that the key point would be, it seems like there's got to be something solid in order to do that
Right.
separating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people will try to say, "Oh, well, see, it's just the atmosphere. That's what did it." And this leads to other types of alternate theories. Like you'll hear, there's a gentleman, Dr. Kent Hovind, who's a biblical creationist, but he, of course, rejects biblical cosmology. For whatever reason, maybe it's just his age. He grew up in a different time, but he believes when he tries to interpret this passage that the waters above, the waters that were divided off and remained above, were just ice around the globe, and that's what melted and caused it to rain during the flood for 40 days. And so that's his interpretation. Obviously, what I
Hmm.
just explained, he calls it ice canopy theory. That's not in the scriptures. That's just him trying to create an ad hoc, explanation.
Right, right.
So that because we do see later in scripture, these waters above are still talked about. They haven't gone anywhere.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So that's kind of important, right? Because that's going to prevent, people from going to the moon.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, unless you've got an
Hmm.
advanced ship that we don't know about that can traverse both open, negative 14 psi vacuum of space, plus go into a pressurized water system and be okay. Which I don't know any physics of any ship that's been made like that. But
So just to
anyway,
be clear, just to be clear, the picture that is being painted here for us in Genesis 1, 6 through 8 is that, and you said it a moment ago, so I just want to latch onto that. Right now, there is a solid uh, material that is separating waters above it from waters below it.
yeah. And the waters
Okay.
below it in Genesis 1, 9 through 13, it goes on to explain the waters below it. That's what receded, and then the mountain, the dry lands appeared.
Mhm.
It's obviously man's put on the dry land to live, right? So it all has a purpose and a function of step by step, day by day, 6 days of creation of what's actually taking place. And then, of course, verses 14 through 17, the sun, moon, and stars are placed in the Shomayim.
In the heavens. Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, when you get into this conversation, some people that take the firmament seriously, they'll say, "Oh, well, see, it says it was placed in." They think in as in under the firmament.
Mm.
So they'll say that, "Oh, it just must be the sun and stars are like really, really high up in our atmosphere under the firmament," but that's not what the Bible describes either. So, well,
Okay.
we can get into all the details, and we got some,
Yep.
more scriptures to go over, and even church apologists, writers, bishops, and their words as well, and what they believed well into the 700s, 800s. They all had the same consistent idea of what was above us,
Okay. Yeah.
and we're teaching this systematically to new converts. So, all right. So basically, if we look here in Genesis 7:11 through 12, obviously the famous flood story, 600 year of Noah's life on the 17th day of the second month, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. And the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights.
Mhm.
Now, this is a fascinating concept because in the old KJV, it'll say the floodgates of the firmament were opened, but many translations will just use heaven here. And a floodgate, this is actually a word which is exactly what it is. Have you ever been to a dam and seen floodgates?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so that's the definition of the word. This
Hmm.
isn't some idiom. This isn't some allegorical translation. That's literally the definition of the Hebrew word used there for it's like a sluice. It's a floodgate.
Right. And what I'm saying is all the fountains of the great deep, that's the waters below.
Uh-huh.
And then the floodgates of the heavens, that's the waters above that we just read about in Genesis 6 or 1, 6 through 8.
Yeah, that's right. So this is
Mhm.
why there is a the earth is being flooded from below and from above, right? Nothing's escaping except unless you're on that ark. So this is a big deal. This is why it would rain for so long. And this is actually we're going to go to it depends on how comfortable you are with discussing other Israelite literature that is, only in the Ethiopian canon, but was found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, but is not in the Protestant canon by
Mhm.
common acceptance. Things like Enoch and Jubilees that go into greater depth explaining this stuff, explaining seriously the seven floodgates of the firmament and the seven fountains of the deep. Those are what opened and burst forth and then were closed after they were finished. And so because the Noah was in the boat for about a year and the flood waters prevailed um, mightily. I think it was after 150 days he could see the tops of the mountains. Things were starting to already recede. We get into Genesis 7 and 8, the fuller text to see all the descriptive details there. But um, that's where it gets more specific as far as like, oh, hey, here's what ancient Israelite writers, whether they were put it in a canon or not, this is what ancient Israelite writers were writing and teaching.
Mm.
So even someone like anyway, but I mean I've got some quotes from Enoch that I'll go over,
Yeah,
but
sure.
for the reader to understand, um, this is describing a working model that works with physics. So if you have a pressurized system, I mean, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, Trey, but have you ever thought about like how we have air pressure?
Not too deeply. I think I did a physics class back in like 2013, but it's been a while.
Okay. So what we're taught, the model growing up, is that we live on a ball in space, and that we have a pressurized air system with the atmosphere that gets thinner and thinner the higher up in altitude you go until you reach what they would call space, which is very, very, very thin particulate atmosphere, unbreathable. Oxygen's already dispersed to a point where a human can't live, exist, or breathe, and essentially everything's just falling off the Earth into space. Essentially, the air particles, but gravity and the density of the atmosphere keeps it here long enough for us to live and breathe before it floats away. That's the official summary explanation. And the atmospheric compression supposedly is 18 quintillion parts per million. So my hand waving through the air in front of me right now is in a super pressurized atmosphere that my body was designed to exist within. And that particular air pressure as, particulate matter that they try to get microscopic measurements with to say that it's 18 quintillion parts per million, or commonly known as 14 psi. Okay.
Okay.
And they'll say if you go into space, then you go into like a negative 14 psi or negative or 72 torr negative. Like they'll say you go into a different measurement system for lack of pressure, which is generically referred to as a vacuum, but it technically isn't something that's actively pulling or sucking. It's just the second law of thermodynamics they claim would take place, which is you've now moved into a super low pressure. So therefore anything pressurized would disperse. Okay. Second law of thermodynamics.
Mhm.
So that's where they claim that they can't exit the earth. They go into this thing called space, that we see the images, the depictions, we see quote unquote photos from high altitudes of the earth, but then they can't seem to just take a photo out the window facing the stars. So what they do send back instead are satellite images that are data points that are then artistically turned into pictures of nebulas and stars and the sun and distant things like that. Okay. That they claim are being taken from a satellite out into space. This is something that people just have to research. If this is your first time ever hearing this information, you don't realize that the images produced by the federal government through NASA are called images and not photographs. And there's a legal definitional difference. An image is something that's a composite that's created. A photograph is a genuine picture. Okay. So they provide you images of the data they interpret to show you space, distant galaxies, Uranus, Jupiter's storm on the top, that kind of stuff. They're not. So anyway, this is why the controversy comes up. Okay.
Right.
Without going into all the problems with the moon landing and everything, and the capsule and the size and all the, them taking a golf cart up there with hitting a golf ball and acting like it's, la-di-da, lackadaisical, while they're in this extreme life-threatening environment. One little tear on their, their astronaut suit, and their blood would boil and it'd swell up within seconds and die. But they're up there just jumping around, falling down, getting up, playing golf, just acting like nothing, we're cool. We're out here. And by the way, that's another thing that no one hardly ever talks about. Like if you see some of the Air Force footage of people doing high altitude flights, where they had to start putting on specialized, I don't know the official terminology, so I apologize. I know you're in the military, you're in the Air Force, right?
Army.
You're in the Army. Okay. So you might know the official name for these types of jumpsuits, but they're not a normal pilot's jumpsuit. It's like a specialized pressurized jumpsuit, because when they get up to like 80,000 feet, the suit starts to swell and get real tight and they can't move their arms, and it's much more difficult to navigate the airplane. That's just at 80,000 feet. Now they're claiming they've left. That's because the air pressure around them is less and less and less. And so the air pressure in their suit for their lungs to stay functioning is greater and greater and greater, because it's trying to push out. Right. But yet we see supposed spacewalks of these guys just moving around like nothing, bending their arms and elbows like it's no problem. There's no puffiness. They're on the, like I said, they're bouncing around on the moon, walking, moving, planting flags, driving a cart, like no resistance. They're jumping around, having a good time. It's physics. By physics standard, it is improbable and doesn't match the reality that we see from other scientific or military experiments. So there's a lot of problems within what's observed versus what's claimed, images versus videos that have been brought back with bubbles floating by randomly in space. And you're like, where'd the bubble come from? Like, again, if the average person listening, it's your first time hearing this stuff and you haven't researched any of it, and you think I'm just making this up, you're going to have to look into it, do your own research on some of these things. Because you will find everything that's all the videos still out there, the CGI mistakes, the overlaying laps of hands of, people grabbing it, nothing, because the rendering of the layer didn't happen in front of them. They're supposed to be floating in the ISS and picking up hats and moving things around and talking while giving an interview, but suddenly there's nothing in their hand and they're still moving because whatever was supposed to be rendered in front of them with the augmented reality didn't work. And they look like they're weird. They look weird. They look like they're on drugs or something, like they're moving around without purpose. So there's a lot of that stuff that the average person can research, but I'd love to focus people on just to cut the legs out from all of that, because all of it's stagecraft. None of it matters, because our Heavenly Father has already told us right from the get-go, He created a world with a extended surface that is over us, that separated waters above from below. The waters below became our seas and oceans, rivers and lakes. The waters above is still there, and it's a part of the Shomayim. And there are multiple layers of Shomayim. This is why in Genesis 1:1, Trey, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and then the singular earth.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a key point. And we saw that in Genesis 1, 6 through 8 as well.
Well,
And
six
here.
through eight, 6 through 8 is day two. So on day two,
Mhm.
He creates the firmament directly over us that divided the waters. But
Mhm.
before, on day one, He created the heavens, plural, which we're going to go
Mhm.
into the additional scriptures that talk about the other 6 layers, so 7 total layers. So on day one, He created the 6 total layers plus a earth that's just dirt sitting in a big bucket of water. So that's why on day two, He has to go into the watery enclosed, or the watery flooded earth, if you will,
Mhm.
create a seventh and final firmament to separate those waters, reduce the waters below that last enclosure to create the sky that we understand, where verse 19 and 20 in Genesis 1 says it's the open firmament where the birds fly.
Mm.
So now He's created the enclosure with the airspace, with the air pressure, with the waters for land, seas, lakes, plus the dry land for Him to put animals and mankind on. So
Mm.
this is a purposeful, intentional creation that matches what is required if we try to build a model to match it. Okay. I don't know if you ever
Mm.
thought about this, Trey, but you cannot build a model to match what we're told if we live on a ball in space.
Yeah, that's the key point. And so, just if I may briefly, I appreciate you giving us this introduction with these couple verses and then starting to kind of poke some holes in the modern cosmological account there. And then really pointing out that what matters the most, and I said this at the very beginning from both of us, is, what did God reveal through the scriptures, right? That's what matters the most. If it can be shown with confidence, if not certainty, that the scriptures present a certain cosmology that is incompatible with the modern account, then we have a problem. And our impulse would of course be to go with what God said in the scriptures rather than what modern men say, and then do our darndest to make it fit, which is
I
what a lot
pray.
of yeah, what a lot of people do. So, no, please continue. Let
Yeah.
us know what you got next.
Yeah. Job 22:14. Thick clouds veil Him, speaking of Yahweh the Father, so He does not see us as He traverses the vault of heaven. So now
And
that we
what's
already get
that? And what's that word there? The rakia?
the heaven, it was the Shomayim. Now
Mm-hmm.
remember, the Shomayim was, it's poorly rendered as sky in modern translations, but the firmament, the expanse, was called the heaven.
Right, the
Okay.
vault word is what I was asking about. The vault.
Well,
Is
well,
that rakia?
the vault is the descriptor shape of the firmament, which is called the
Mm-hmm.
heaven above us.
Mm-hmm.
So going forward, what I always try to remind folks is that Genesis 1:8 has already directly told you that the word heaven was the name given to this structure called the firmament. So when I make a statement in my videos and some of my debates and discussions, and I say the firmament structure is mentioned, described, and explained and used in eschatology, used in judgment, used in reference to relationship between man and God over 500 times in Old and New Testament, that's what I'm talking about. The word heaven is used in replete from Genesis to Revelation, because in verse 8, right off the bat, it already gave us the definition of what heaven is. It's the firmament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's
Okay.
multiple. That's why Deuteronomy 10:14 talks about Yahweh's in the highest heaven. The heaven of heavens is what sometimes it's translated as. It's also in Psalm 115, Yahweh's in the heaven of heavens.
Right. That's
All
why he's
right.
called the Most High. We talked about that
Yeah.
in our episode. And I just want to, just from a lexical perspective, what I was thinking of is I tend to read the NRSV. And so in the NRSV, it translates that word, which is translated here on the screen as vault, it says dome. Now it's the Hebrew
Yeah.
word, I think it's the Hebrew word, I don't know if I'm probably going to botch the pronunciation, but it looks like hug or hug,
Mhm.
something like that. And
Yeah.
it's often,
CHUG. Chug.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's often translated circle, and that'll come up
Mhm.
later as well.
So the vault, I mean, by most definitions of vault is a dome. But there's
Mhm.
very, like, if you look up all the different types of vaults in architecture, there's a lot of different styles, but the interior concept that makes it vaulted is that it's a dome, or it
Mhm.
has that arch dome shape. So yes. But the point is, here it is, it's directly telling us that Yahweh traverses. I mean, he walks upon the
Mm.
actual vault of heaven above us. All
Right.
right. Psalm
Mhm.
33, 13 through 14. Yahweh looks down from heaven. He sees all the sons of men from his dwelling place. He gazes on all who inhabit the earth. This is just a, CGI. This is just an image, AI image generated image of him looking down through a firmament upon the earth as he
Yeah.
traverses the vault of heaven, right? This is,
Mhm.
if we take it literally, this is his perspective. This is how he, from his dwelling place, looks down upon everything happening in the earth. Have you ever seen a looking glass, like a little dome shaped magnifier that you can put down on words and it magnifies the words?
Yeah, like the detective magnifying glass thing.
Well, the not the one with the handle and the circular, but it's more like it's an actual dome, but it's a magnifier glass, and you just
Oh, yes. Yes,
it's kind of an
I've seen
older
those.
thing that, yeah, like,
Mhm.
older folks would have used it back in the day, but and they would just slide it across the newspaper and it magnified
Yeah.
all the sentence letters for them, right?
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's literally, like, so let's just think about that for a minute. So if you're at the top of the dome looking down in through a dome and it magnifies everything from underneath it,
Mm.
he's got 7 of them that he's looking down through.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I mean, look at the verse on the screen. Look at the words on the screen. In light of what we've already talked about before with the waters above,
Hmm.
um, that
And
seems to
he's
be
looking
the
down.
image. Exactly,
He's
looking
looking
down,
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
from his dwelling place in the
Yeah.
heavens. Right.
Yeah. So it's consistent with the relational direction, like up and down is consistent throughout the scriptures, as it says, the heaven is as high as the heaven is above the earth. So great is
Hmm.
our God's love for us, right? So like
Right.
that is a directional correlation in comparison to height above the earth. It's always above the earth. It's not, so in the heliocentric model, it's reinterpreted as, well, heaven is just the sky, this clouds, the atmosphere. And then from a like a rabbinic perspective, much later, they'll say, oh, well, the heaven, there's 3 heavens, and the first heaven's the sky, the second heaven is outer space, solar systems and galaxies, and the third heaven is another realm or dimension that we can't see. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
Hmm.
also carried over into Protestant interpretations. A lot of pastors will use that type of language. Um, but that's not at all what the Bible describes. The Bible
Okay.
describes a solid and something that encompasses the earth, like
Yeah,
a vaulted structure.
that's an attempt to make what the Bible describes fit with what modern people describe
Right. Yeah.
about our reality.
Because if you actually try to talk about this with people, some people will laugh at you and they'll think that you know, they'll think that you're dumb. They'll ridicule you. They'll make fun of you. They'll think, oh,
Mm.
how could you possibly believe? And sometimes I run into Christians who, when I talk to them about this, they get kind of angry. They can't refute the scriptures. They can't refute the definitions of the word. So they just say to me, I refuse to believe that God is so small.
Mm. Hmm.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Because they think vastness of space, right? It's,
Mm.
oh, they think stars like Betelgeuse is, 472 light years away, right? An incomprehensible distance as far as like traveling at the speed of light for 472 years before you get to the star that supposedly you can see with your natural eye. Well, that's not how eyes work. That's not how the law of perspective works as far as how things shrink as they get further away from your natural eye. But yet you think you can see something that's 472 light years away, like no problem?
Mm.
So that doesn't even match science. Like you can't even see an airplane 4 miles up flying over your head, but you think you can see Betelgeuse at 472 miles away.
Well, that's a good angle to come at this from is, hey, let's take the model that's being offered to us by modern science and let's
Yeah.
see if it actually works. But like you said, there's a sense in which we don't even need to do that if we have the revelation from the Father about what he did.
Right.
And look, we can nobody, no one who watches this or engages with us on this topic can dispute that we do have in the Bible descriptions of what God did
Mhm.
in creating this reality. Now, the
Yeah.
only question is, what do those descriptions mean? And can they fit with what's being told to us in the modern world or not? And so I appreciate
Yeah.
you diving into this.
And that's where it gets interesting, right? Because when you look up the definition of the word firmament from Genesis 1, it
Mhm.
it directly tells you it considered a vault of heaven regarded by the Hebrews as solid, an
Mhm.
extended surface, not
Mhm.
just air, right?
Right.
An extended surface regarded by the Hebrews as a vaulted solid substance, right?
Right.
Um,
Right. Mhm.
so Revelation 6, could we jump forward a little bit just because we're getting
Yep.
more descriptions of this concept that was already introduced now being used.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay. So we got Genesis 6, or excuse me, Revelation 6, 12 through 14. I watched as the Lamb opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black like sackcloth of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red. And the stars of the sky, that's the word heaven,
Mhm.
stars of the heaven fell to the earth like unripe figs dropping from a tree shaken by a great wind.
Mhm.
The heaven receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. So before we have this conversation, Trey, if you were to read this passage, what
Yeah.
did you envision as being receded like a scroll and being rolled up?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm like before this kind of conversation, I don't know that I really thought about it, to be honest with you.
So I've had pastors on my pastors and apologists, even a PhD in Hebrew. I've had them on my channel and I've asked them these questions and I say, what is this being rolled up? What is
Right.
this
Yeah.
that's it's describing? Right. And they'll say, oh, some will say, oh, it's the veil, the dimensional veil between earth and heaven being opened up, kind of like a Thanos power stone portal
Right,
being
right,
created,
right.
right? So we
Yeah,
can
like a
step through it.
portal. Hmm.
They'll say something like that. Literally with the description from Thanos and the Avengers, by the way. I'm not even playing. Literally telling it's like Thanos and the Avengers, and he opens up a portal. I'm like, you mean like the magician, the wicked magic that's being just depicted? So anyway, other people have told me like, oh well, heaven's already around us all the time anyway, and it's
Mhm.
just you can't see it because it's already around you. It's just this veil. Your eyes have to be open to see it's already all around you. And I'm like, so wait a minute, that's not the directional relationship I see consistently given in scripture, right? That heaven is above the earth, that
Mhm.
Christ ascended through the heavens up, Hebrews 4:15, Acts chapter
Mhm.
1, he ascended up, right? That
Yeah.
the Christ is going to descend down, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
The New Jerusalem is going to descend down, angels descend down. Like
Right.
that's not consistent with the language. Otherwise,
Yeah.
like
And
then
and it
then then
keep
what am I to think? That I could just go to a specific location and then I'm in a different ethereal location in heaven also? Have you ever seen the 2015 movie called Tomorrow World with
no.
George Clooney and some
No.
other people?
Mm-mm.
Some kind of so it's a Disney movie about that exact concept. It's a
Okay.
Disney movie that says Tomorrowland or Tomorrow World is uh, scientists in the 1950s in the United States had advanced in technology so much that they found a way to translate themselves into another realm that exists all around us, right? Kind of like a multiverse theory type of thing, to where there's another Earth that they can walk on as long as they had this little ring and they turned on the ring and it translated them into this other realm to where then they built this super, like sophisticated society that's all based on science and flying cars and levitating concepts and everything. Stuff that the normal person couldn't handle. So they decided to keep it in that realm. And then they just go back to that realm to visit from time to time, right? It's a science fiction story, right?
Yeah, that reminds me actually of the C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew. That's
Hmm.
almost the exact same plot. You know, they have the rings where they can enter into this other world and come back and forth
Yeah.
and so on. But yeah, so just to make a really simple, clear point about this, when it says the sky receded like a scroll, we have to ask ourselves what is being talked about. Well, I mean, you can just look up, right? Whatever that thing up there is that we're looking at, that is described as being created, where Jesus went, right? He ascended up there. That's the thing that's going to be receded like a scroll. So now we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what did the what does the Bible say that that thing is, right? And we've talked
It,
about that a little bit. Yeah,
it tells you on page one.
yeah, exactly.
On page one. So you
Hmm.
are not mistaken going forward. It told you on page one. But
Yeah.
people don't take the definition seriously. They just be like,
Hmm.
whatever. And if they never look up the definition, they just immediately read it with the lens of, oh, I'm on a ball in space, so it must be somehow describing that in some poetic language, you know.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is what even scholars will say this at times. Oh, well, it's just a poetic explanation. It was a doctrine of accommodation. They're just God was speaking to them in a manner they could understand at the time. But the truth is now shown to us because, NASA and rockets and satellites and things like that. So that's where like it's the strangest mindset to me, because they'll look at Genesis 1 and they'll say God didn't really mean what he said at that point, because we've been shown the truth now by other people, by non-prophets of Yahweh, like by government agencies building rockets and receiving incentivized for money to do these things. So we've been shown the truth now by men incentivized by money. But yeah, we disagree with filthy lucre and preaching for filthy lucre's sake, preaching a truth contrary to what the prophet said, right? So they disagree with that when you step into the church. But immediately when you get outside the church, they're willing to question God and just wholeheartedly swallow whatever the government tells them without questioning that for filthy lucre's sake.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, look, like I said, everyone has a theology, everyone has a cosmology.
Mhm.
Well, let's take that one step further. Everyone has the prophets they believe, right?
Mhm.
The people that are their messengers, the people that give them what they believe is the truth. And so to your point, it sure seems like on this issue, we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, well, who has the authority to tell me what this reality is? Who has access to the truth here? And
Yeah,
as believers in these scriptures, surely if they speak to it, that would be our first go-to for who has the truth, right? We wouldn't
yeah.
go, we wouldn't go, these guys don't know what they're talking about, as opposed to, NASA 3,000, 2,000 years later. Surely not. We wouldn't pick them over these guys, would we? I mean, it seems like we wouldn't, but I know a lot of people do.
They do. They
So,
do. And they argue vehemently because I feel like there's a lot of fear of man involved.
mm,
And because they don't
mm,
want to be ridiculed or feel
sure.
like they're going to lose their position at their church, because they may have come to like there is a gentleman named Nate Wolf. We had him. Me and a buddy, West Plays Jones. He has a channel called West Plays Music, and we have a show that we've done for 3 years called Uncommon Ground, which is all about biblical cosmology. And in the first season, we interviewed a pastor who was fired because he started researching this topic, and
Wow.
the elders of
Wow.
his church found out, and the other pastors found out that he hadn't even given a sermon on it. He hadn't talked about it. He just went to a conference to do research on it, and they fired him. So this
Wow.
can cause persecution. And he has not since, to my knowledge, gone back to pastoring a church after that. And that was like 2017, 2018. So it's a lot of people are scared of this topic because they know the world is pushing a narrative of aliens and space, satellites, relativity. Like the world has been pushing this for a long time. But it's still, in comparison with the history of man, it's only been a small sliver of time that they've been pushing a heliocentric model. So the rest of history, including the actual prophets of God, Christ himself even, have told a different story, which is a physical heaven above us, a physical sky that can be receded like a scroll for a purpose, right? By the way, stars are going to fall from the sky. Do we think that that's literal?
I was about to mention that, and notice the metaphor, right? They fall to the earth like unripe figs dropping from a tree shaken. Well, what that metaphor implies about the stars is that they're fixed somewhere, as if they're located somewhere,
Yeah.
in a kind of stable position, not in the modern cosmological concept, which is like they're zooming around the universe in some way.
Well, the sun is described. I didn't have, I had to try to figure out what's a good introductory set of verses and quotes to tackle
Yeah,
this, because brother, we could talk about this for like 10 hours.
of
Like
course,
there's
of course.
so many passages that talk about this and describe things. So I'm trying to give the cliff notes on this, but um, when you dig deeper into how the sun, moon, and stars are placed in the firmament, just like the sun and moon do follow a circuit above us in the firmament. This is Psalm 19:6.
Hmm.
Right. So from the and this is deceptive in the translation in Psalm 19:6. I don't have a slide for this, but I think you'll be able to follow along. The common translation in Psalm 19:6, it says, "And the sun rises from where it rises, so it will set. In the heaven, it completes its circuit." But if you look in the Hebrew, that word rises, that's translated as rises in English, is just the word for going forth, proceeding forth. But when you translate it as the word rises, it gives you more of a heliocentric mind frame. Like we're
Yeah,
spinning
exactly.
backwards and the sun is rising from our perspective because we're spinning on a globe backwards. So that's deceptive, right? Not that they're intentionally trying to be deceptive, but it's deceptive in reading it from a modern translation. But if you just read it from the Hebrew, it says it's going forth through the heaven in its circuit. Well, that makes more sense to what's being described from ancient Israelite literature, that is in the firmament in a specific layer, and there's angels in charge of its actual circuit that it completes throughout the seasons of the year. As you probably
Yes.
know, a circuit is something that has a starting place and comes back to the starting place.
Right.
So the heliocentric model teaches us that we're elliptically circuiting the sun, and the sun is rocketing through the universe, and we're chasing it in an elliptical orbit as it's rocketing through the universe. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the biblical view is that from your account, right, that the earth is stable and the
Mhm.
sun is placed in one of these layers above us,
Yeah.
and it's actually it is moving in a circuit.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the actual language of Psalm 19:6.
Mhm.
That is the language of Genesis 1, 14 through 17, where it says the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and he created the stars also. And these were placed in the firmament of the heaven to shine down upon the earth.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So whereas in a heliocentric model, our elliptical orbit makes us dependent upon being around the sun to have life on the earth. It creates a sense of sun worship because it
Mhm.
makes the sun the center of our goings,
Mhm.
and it causes the earth to move, which the Bible says that the earth is firmly fixed and the foundations will never be moved, right? In the
Mhm.
Psalms.
Mhm.
I think it's Psalm 112. So there is, or Psalm 102. There is so there's a lot of passages that talks about how the earth is fixed and never to be moved, and the heaven itself sets on the earth.
Right, yeah, just a quick textual note there. Psalm 119:90, it says, "You have established the earth and it stands fast."
Mhm.
It stands in position.
That's right.
Like
Yeah,
that's
the
literally
earth
what the
doesn't
Hebrew means.
move, the luminaries
Hmm,
above you in the firmament move. Okay.
Okay.
So I wanted to provide this. This is, if you and I grew up in Ethiopia, we wouldn't even question this book because it would have been in our canon the whole time. Okay. The Oriental Orthodox view this as scripture, found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted literally by Christ, Peter, and Jude, with information only found in this book that's not found in anything from Genesis to Malachi. Okay. So in 1 Enoch 33, 1 through 3, it says, "From there I went to the ends of the earth and saw great beasts, and each differed from the other. I saw birds also differing in appearance and beauty and voice, the one differing from the other. To the east of those beasts, I saw the ends of the earth whereon the heaven rests." So since we already have a definition for the word heaven,
Yep, the rakia, the
the
firmament.
firmament. So you could read this: "To the east of those beasts, I saw the ends of the earth whereon the firmament rests."
Hmm.
So the firmament literally touches the earth, resting upon it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this starts to make more sense when we get into Revelation and we see, the correlation of the second coming promises. Revelation 6, the firmament's rolled open like a scroll. Matthew
Mhm.
24:29. Yeah, Christ says that at his second coming, at the coming of the Son of Man, the powers of the heaven, the powers of the firmament will be shaken.
Hmm. Mhm.
It's literally being augmented. It's being rolled back like a scroll. It's
Hmm.
shaking. You also have a correlating prophecy in Revelation 16:18 that there's an earthquake so great it destroys all the cities of the nations. Well, that makes a lot of sense if the massive heaven that sits on the earth is actually shaking. To me, that makes a lot
Understandable,
of
yeah.
sense. You see what I mean? From a practical standpoint, this is like he's shaking the etch a sketch. He's shaking it.
Hmm.
It's like it's the day of the Lord. Everyone's going to know what's going on. Everyone's going to
Yeah,
realize.
Yeah, I
Go
see
ahead.
where you're going. And then the portals of the heaven were open, he says. And so would that be like the floodgates that we saw in
Now, this is explained better in chapter, I think, 74,
okay.
because chapters 72 through 82 in First Enoch goes over the firmament model in great depth.
Mhm.
So it starts out with the sun and its circuit in the heaven. It explains all that throughout the different seasons, then goes into the moon and then the stars. And so the stars go through portals proceeding and inside and out of where they're making their circuit, and they go at the same speed as the sun. But of course, as you know, the moon, it goes at a different speed, which is why it has a different 29-day revolution as opposed to a 30 or 31 like the sun does, right? For the months.
Okay. Mhm.
So the moon seems to go a little bit faster, or I should say slower. So basically, the Enoch tries to describe how the sun and the stars go at the same speed and kind of in the same circuit.
Okay.
They're in
Got it.
different placements, but at the same speed.
Okay.
And of course, the portals are just places within the actual structure where things can come and go depending on what's needed for the different seasons. So in chapter, I believe it's 72, when it's giving greater depiction of the sun and how the sun moves in the firmament, it talks about it rising and lowering as it goes through different portions of it throughout different times of the year. So
Hmm.
that's why, from our perspective, we see it as it goes closer on the inner tropic as opposed to the outer tropic, right? That's why
Hmm.
the length of days shrink and so like, you get down to 8 to 9 hours of sunlight versus 14 or 15 hours of sunlight. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Depends,
Mhm.
also depends on where you are on the earth as well. Because you're physically under a location point of the firmament where the sun is not just going in a circle, but it's also expanding its circuit depending on the season
Okay. Got it.
and speeding up. So Enoch explains all this
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Understood. But the key point on this slide is, of course, the ends of the earth, the ends of the
Mhm.
land, the earth that was created.
Yep.
The vision, the idea here is that the heaven, that solid firmament, actually touches down
Yeah.
on that land.
And so we have a prophet that declares he literally saw this.
Mhm.
Why doesn't anyone take this seriously?
Right. Of course, the common answer that you'll find from a lot will be, well, this isn't scripture, which, that goes into a whole other subject, but that's one of the primary
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah. Well, even so, like, okay, is this the same definite? Like, you would think, though, they would say, wait a minute, but God, wait, Jesus used the word heaven. Moses used the word heaven.
Right,
Amos,
right,
Isaiah used the word heaven also. Is it the same definition?
right, right.
Is it the same? Like, is there continuity in their belief? This is
Mhm.
exclusively an ancient Israelite literature.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
This isn't from Babylon. This isn't from, you know, uh, ancient Papua New Guinea. Like, this is exclusively ancient Israelite literature. Like I said, from details that Christ, Peter, and Jude quote from. I mean, Jude's quoting from chapter 1
Mhm.
in Jude 14, right? He just
Mhm.
the starting chapter, right? Which talks about the second coming, you know, which when Christ describes the second coming, he uses the word heaven and the powers of the heaven are shaken. The firmament's being rolled open like a scroll. He's coming down with his father's angels. Is there continuity here?
Yeah, sure seems like it. And
You
that
know?
one, yeah, the key point would be, why wouldn't we take his understanding, this Israelite's understanding of the scriptures?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we take his understanding, and why would we go with modern cosmologists'
Yeah.
understanding? Yeah.
Yeah. It's told to us in great depth. Okay. So again, I'm gonna challenge the viewer a little bit. Okay. So this is the Testament of Levi amongst it's contained in a work called the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. And this is included in the Armenian canon from the 15th century. Okay. Did you probably familiar with the Council of Trent,
Yeah,
right? How
a
they
little bit.
decided, okay, these will be called Deuterocanon, and
Hmm.
but beyond the Deuterocanon, we're going to keep the 66 from the Vulgate and from tradition. And so the Catholic Church kind of finalized a canon in the 1500s.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
bro, it took you some time, didn't it? But they still, even then, they still had a Deuterocanon of the additional 14, right? Which is different from the Orthodox canon, which depends on which Orthodox you're in, could be 72 or 73. And then that's why the early KJVs had the additional 14 books in them printed in
Yeah,
the
that's
United
right.
States. You know what I mean? Printed in the Americas, I should say. And like 1527 KJV and the 1611, that kind of stuff. And then it wasn't until the 1880s until those additional 14 books were stopped being printed with it. And it was just the 66 that we know today. And
Yeah,
the
key
average,
point for all the KGV only folks out there who might tune in. The
yeah,
original
that's right.
KGV for almost 200 years included the Apocrypha.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And books that were in the Apocrypha talk about the firmament with the same descriptions as the Testament of Levi and Enoch and all these other consistent descriptions. So in Testament of Levi, chapter 3, 1 through 10, it actually gives us a breakdown of all 7 layers of the firmament.
Oh, wow.
So if you grew up in the 1500s and Armenian Syriac or the Armenian Orthodox Church, because your fathers believed in Nestorianism and you were excommunicated from from the Orthodox previously, then you would have grown up in a scenario with a Bible that has this information in it, right? So it says here in verse 1, here therefore regarding the 7 heavens which have been shown to you. So now we have a testimony. This is Levi, son of Jacob, his testimony. Okay, the one that Malachi 2 says was a covenant made with Levi for an eternal priesthood, who was considered the mouthpiece. Malachi 2, I think verse 5, you are the mouthpiece of Yahweh. Okay. And in this testimony from Levi, by the way, this is also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Not that the Dead Sea Scrolls makes it, absolutely. I know there's some works found amongst them that it seems to be a library in general and not just a biblical canon. But
the point is, it was ancient Israelite literature. That's
the point is, it was around at the same time they were burying Genesis and Psalms and Enoch and Jubilees and all the other books that are found in there. Deuteronomy's found in there, Leviticus. So it says here, therefore, regarding the 7 heavens which have been shown to you, the lowest is for this cause distressing unto you, in that it beholds all the unrighteous deeds of men. The second, okay, so the lowest. Now we're talking up and down, lowest, highest, lowest.
Right.
So the lowest
gets back to the Most High, right? We have explicit statements in the accepted canon that Yahweh is in the heaven of heavens, implying multiple heavens, right? And now you have here in Testament of Levi, it names 7 heavens, and then it's talking about them in that that language of up and down, right? The lowest is here, and the highest is up here.
That's right. And now, just concerning the lowest, that's where the unrighteous deeds of men are. Oh, well, that's where we are, in the lowest firmament.
So, that's what you said earlier. That's what you said earlier in Genesis 1. He creates the final one that encloses where humans live.
That's right, on day 2. Right. So then all 7 firmaments are completed by the end of day 2, and we're of course at the bottom. I like to describe it like this often, where I say, if you were to build a 7-story house with 2 basements, when you get done and you're standing outside in the yard with your arm around your wife and you're looking at your house that's been completed, and you would not say to your wife, hey, look, we finally finished our collection of wood, nails, and screws. You would look at your new completed home with your family and go, look, our home is completed. And I feel like that's what the Father did when he finished the firmaments, plural, and said, this is the heaven, because it even encompasses the earth. And as we're going to get to more descriptions of it, the greatest heaven, the one that he lives at, the biggest one, encompasses all the others.
Interesting. Yeah, kind of like an umbrella, like an expanding umbrella type above.
Yeah.
Okay. One point I want to make here textually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick point here on this, because some might have an issue with the concept of plural heavens, plural firmaments, if you will, above us. But look, even in Genesis, it uses the plural term. It says heavens, plural. And then in Paul's writing in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, he mentions a person in Christ who 14 years ago was, catch the language here, caught up to the 3rd heaven.
That's right.
Okay. So he went up to not one heaven, not the 2nd heaven, the 3rd heaven specifically. So that implies there's, at least in Paul's mind, 3. So we got to take that seriously, in addition to the data in the Old Testament that I highlighted about the plural term.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this passage here in front of us is that it describes what's happening in these different layers.
Mhm.
Okay. So the lowest heaven, that's where man lives. And it goes on to say, the second heaven has fire, snow, and ice made ready for the day of judgment in the righteous judgment of God.
Mhm.
For in it are all the spirits of the retributions for vengeance on men. Now, what's interesting is you see in Job 22, I think, or excuse me, Job 38, verse 22, it says that, do you not know about the storehouses where Yahweh has snow and hail for the day of battle?
Oh, yes, yes. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have
Yeah,
you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? That's Job 38:22 through 23.
right. And of course, hail is ice. Okay.
Mm.
What happens in Joshua 10? Israelites battling the Amorites, where it says, in that day, the more were killed from the fire, from the hail that fell from heaven, than were killed by the sword of Israel. Right. So, in a day of battle, Yahweh throws down hail from heaven on the enemies of Israel.
Mm. Mhm.
And we're going to see that again in Revelation. Large
Mm.
hailstones weighing up to 100 pounds are falling down on the day of the Lord for a day of battle.
Mm.
So fascinating stuff.
And can I point? Yeah, can I point? I want to point one more thing out about that. I want to make sure
Sure.
I'm not speaking out of turn before I say it, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Just give me a second here. Yeah, this is Yahweh speaking in Job
Yes.
38. Yahweh
Yes.
is saying this. Okay,
That's right.
so you can't, verse 22 through 22, 23, you can't brush that off as like, well, it was just Job saying it, or oh, it was just one of his
Yeah.
erroneous friends saying it. Nope, it was
Yeah.
Yahweh saying it in Job 38:22 through 23, friends.
That's right. It wasn't this arrogant young Eliphaz. No, it
Yeah,
was
right.
Yahweh speaking. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, it goes on to say, for in the third heaven are the hosts of the armies, which are ordained for the day of judgment to work vengeance on the spirits of deceit and of Beliar. Now, Beliar is a word for Satan in the
Hmm.
Testaments.
Okay.
In the four heavens above them. Okay, so now we just talked about heaven one, two, three
Hmm. Hmm.
in ascending order above us, and then the next statement is in the four
Mm,
heavens above that.
right.
Okay, so
And
but let's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, yeah, you had a point to make about that. I was going to go to the next thing he says, which is that
Mhm.
in the highest of all
Yes.
dwelleth the great glory, far above all holiness. That's the most high
Yeah.
language we emphasized earlier.
Yes. Yeah. So he's just going to kind of go over the uh, some key points in the first three, and then kind of summarize. There's four above that, and of course at the top is the Almighty. But in number three, it says, "In the third heaven are the hosts, which they have been the deceit and Beliar." So that's interesting because if that's also the location of the paradise of God from 2 Corinthians 12, 1 through 3, right? Which
Mm,
is the New Jerusalem that descends out of heaven. Well, what happens on the day of the Lord when Christ returns with the armies of heaven? Is he's opening the heaven to bring down the paradise he's prepared for us. And what and the angels of heaven come with him. So that makes perfect sense. This is where they've been hanging
mm,
out.
mm,
Also, think about what we already have the description from Genesis 1. We know that between the ground and the firmament that encloses us, which is the first heaven, is just the sky. Okay.
right.
The atmosphere stuff, clouds. But then above that, there's still a container of water between that firmament and the second firmament above it.
Okay.
It's the
Yep.
water that's been separated, right?
Hmm.
So those are not livable spaces for angels
Mm,
or places of mobilization for armies.
right, because you take angels to be not just mere kind of like ethereal spirit beings, but they have a corporeal constitution.
In Revelation 21, when it's describing the New Jerusalem and the gates of the New Jerusalem, it says that angels guard the gates of the New
Hmm.
Jerusalem.
Hmm.
So when that
Wow.
descends from heaven and the nations, as verse 26 and 27 says, the nations will bring their glory into the New Jerusalem.
Hmm.
So they're going to have to come up to it.
Hmm.
Are they going to see those angels guarding the gates?
Right, right. Well, of course, in Genesis 3, you have an angel that's visible guarding the gate into Eden. So, right, right. Yeah.
Spoiler alert, because the New Jerusalem is the return of the Garden of Eden.
Right. Yeah, that's a key theme throughout the scriptures, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. So now we've got a working description. Seven heavens, God's at the top, we're at the bottom. In the sixth heaven, now he's kind of jumping to, now let's get a description of the sixth heaven, right? So he already just like skipped up to say, okay, so we're going in ascending order to the third. Then he skipped to saying, oh, at the top is the Almighty. And then now he's coming back down and describing, now we're at the sixth. Okay. These are the archangels who minister and make propitiation to the Lord for all the sins of the ignorance of the righteous, offering to the Lord a sweet smelling savor, a reasonable and bloodless offering.
Interesting.
This is a super challenging verse for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially a lot of kind of Protestant atonement theology. It's going to be a no deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question that immediately arises is, wait a minute, is heaven a real place?
Right.
What's going on here? This sounds like Leviticus 1 language. It sounds like priesthood language. What's going on here?
Yeah, and then of course in the fifth heaven you have like a hierarchy going on, because in the sixth heaven are the archangels, and then in the heaven below that are angels who bear answers to other angels, the angels of the presence of the Lord.
In Jubilees chapter 1 explains the angels of the presence of the Lord are the archangels made on day one before the other angels. That's why First Enoch chapter 20 describes the 7 archangels of God. First Enoch chapter 70, 71 talks about those special 7 archangels of God who can go in and out of the house of God and actually minister him directly.
And I should say, in Job 38, the same chapter we appealed to earlier, that obviously has conceptual overlap with the Testament of Levi here, with respect to the storehouses. We read that in verse 22 through 23. In verse 7, it talks about Yahweh creating the heavens and the earth. Here it says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? And then he says in verse 7, when the morning stars sang together, when all the sons of God shouted for joy.
Yeah, they watched creation happen because they're made on day one, and then he continues to make everything as they witness it. This is how the rebellious angels who came down in First Enoch, they're being reprimanded for teaching mankind the secrets of heaven that they were wanting to learn, because the angels watched everything be made. So they got a lot of extra knowledge than we do. Right? Okay. So, but they're also doing priestly duties here.
Yeah,
and
that's
this is where I always try to remind people that the angels are a priesthood. They're literally called ministering servants in Hebrews 1:14.
Yeah, ministering servants sent for the good of humans. Yeah.
What do we see in Exodus 23? The angel that accompanied them, who then is there with them in Leviticus 8 and 9, when Aaron and his sons are being ordained for the high priesthood positions, and the Levites themselves are, they're all being given a hierarchical level of Levitical priesthood. The angel of the presence who accompanied with them is hovering over them the whole time and approving everything.
Interesting. Yeah. And of course, there's that famous passage in Exodus, what is it, 22, 32, somewhere around there, about the angel in whom Yahweh will place his name.
Exodus 23, yeah.
Who will even have leeway to forgive sins or not?
No, he will not forgive sins. No.
Something like that. Isn't that what it says?
He says, listen to his voice. My words are in him, but he will do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your sins.
Yeah, right. So he can choose to forgive sins or not, is the point I'm making with that angel.
I don't think it's saying that. I know some people seem to read it that way, but I've never understood how that's pulled out of there.
Or at least he has the authority to not forgive sins. It's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, he has the authority of Yahweh, but in that he's not forgiving their transgression. He's an enforcer. He's like a pretty harsh babysitter, right? He's that's why Leviticus 9, strange fire, Nadab and Abihu are killed from fire that comes out from the altar. Like, what do we think's happening there? So we think that, what is this, like they put a firework in there and it's exploded at the altar and they were killed by it? Right. Or the thing that's hovering above the altar, which is making sure they're doing everything right, exacts judgment, because angels destroy people with fire.
Yeah, and there's angels who are destroyers throughout the scriptures, throughout the Old Testament. This is a constant theme.
Yeah.
So
they're literally called ministers of flame and fire also in Psalms, right? So this is where, here we are, ministers, priesthood duties in heaven. So now we've got a whole trade. We got a whole nother concept here. Like sixth heaven, what are we saying? Is that, wait, is there a temple in heaven?
Right. Where else do you Offer sacrifices, except for a sacred space. Yeah.
So
Sanctuary.
wait, so in Hebrews, when it says that Yeshua is ministering in a temple in Hebrews 8, 1 and 2 in heaven,
Mm.
is that a real literal temple
Mm. Right.
that he's
That's the
ministering in?
question.
In Hebrews 1, 4 through 6 says he was made greater, given greater authority than the angels, given a name better than the angels, because he's
Mm.
now has all authority in heaven and earth. He's been made high priest forever. So now he's in a position of he is the high priest even over the angels, the angelic priesthood.
Because he's in other texts at the right hand of the Father. He's in the highest heaven.
Hebrews 1, 3, Hebrews 2:17, Hebrews 8, 1 through 2.
Interesting. Wow,
Yeah.
fascinating.
Okay. So it says, it goes, you already talked about the fifth heaven where there seems to be lesser angels that then bear answers to the angels above. And the fourth heaven next to this are thrones and dominions in which always they offer praise to God. Now, this to me is really cool because it's like, oh, wait a minute. I think Paul kind of loosely references this, right?
Indeed,
In
indeed. He does use
Colossians.
that language. Mm-hmm.
Now Christ has been firstborn of all creation, who is of every principality, throne, and dominion, right? Colossians, I think,
Yeah,
what, 15 through
yes.
17?
I'm pulling it up, but I know what you're talking about. Keep going. Yep.
Yeah. So we're actually getting some mention of thrones and dominions now, of righteousness, of these other. This is where the Dr. Michael Heiser theory would come in with the whole council of the Elohim, the divine
Mm-hmm.
council concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
When therefore the Lord looked upon us, all of us are shaken. Surely the heavens and the earth and the abysses are shaken at the presence of his majesty. But the sons of men, having no perception of these things, sin and provoke the Most High. So that's a fascinating ending to this little 10 verses because it's like, by the way, mankind doesn't know any of the stuff that's happening up here. And so they sin and provoke the Most High. So I think that's why there's like an extreme amount of mercy offered to mankind.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we see these rebellious angels in Genesis 6 leave, like Hebrew, 1 Enoch 15 says they left the high holy heaven and defiled themselves with the blood of women. And now they can't return to heaven because to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah, they have more perception of all of these things because according to these texts, they have been in these places.
Christ tells us in Matthew 18, verse 11, that the angels in heaven stare at the face of his Father.
That is a fascinating text I've thought about before. What does that even mean? Like
Does the
how could
Father
that,
have a real
yeah,
body? Does
right,
he have a
right.
real face to be stared at?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this a little bit before. I think we talked about it during our episode, and I
Yeah.
totally understand why you would emphasize the various texts in the scriptures. Of course, the classic response is anthropomorphism, right? Just like we're going to talk
Mhm.
about later with all of this stuff we're talking about now is
Yeah.
the kind of doctrine of accommodation. Well, they were just saying things the way that these old ancient ignorant people would understand a point being made. Um, but anyway, so yeah, let's keep going. Do you have any more other biblical texts you want to share?
No, but I have some
Okay.
interesting concepts from some patristic fathers,
All right,
right?
let's get into it.
So Irenaeus of Lyons, mid-second century, in a book called Demonstration of Apostolic Preaching. Now, in case people aren't aware of what this was like a Cliff Notes for new believers.
Mm.
And in the opening chapters, he decides, I'm going to explain to all the new believers what the creation looks like. And so he says, now this world is encompassed by seven heavens, in which dwell powers and angels and archangels doing service to God, the Almighty and maker of all things, not as though he was in need, but that they not be idle and unprofitable and ineffectual. Now, the heaven which is first from above and encompasses the rest. So now he's starting from top down.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that of wisdom, and the second from it is understanding. The third is counsel. He's doing that Isaiah 11, seven spirits
Yes,
motif. He's
yes,
applying
yes.
each of those to the firmaments.
Okay.
The third counsel, the fourth reckoned from above, that's of might. The fifth of knowledge, the sixth of godliness, and the seventh is the firmament of ours. And it's full of
Hmm.
fear of that spirit which gives light to the heavens.
Hmm.
Now, this is the fascinating part here. For as the pattern of this, Moses received the seven branch candlestick that shine continually in the holy place. So he's teaching
Interesting.
new believers that the menorah was literally patterned after the seven firmaments. So what do we see with the menorah, the traditional shape, the seven branch candlestick?
Right. It kind of goes like this, and then there's yeah.
They get smaller and smaller and smaller, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a big outer, the branches that stretch out the outer candles, and then
Yep.
there's another inner layer, another inner
Okay.
layer,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? So there's a larger firmament that encompasses the rest.
Right.
and then the
Got it.
smaller firmaments get between. Like he's literally saying, like you basically turn the menorah upside down, and you've got the seven heavens.
Okay.
That's
Right.
fascinating to me. Like it's
Well, it's, I mean, let me
that's
just
his
say,
claim. That's just his claim.
you've got Irenaeus, second, third century guy, second century mostly, who
Yeah.
is doing the same thing, cosmologically speaking, as we just noted in the Testament of Levi and in Enoch,
Yes.
is there's seven heavens.
Yes. So this is a guy that literally is famous for his book against heresies. Right? And in against heresies, what's he doing? He's combating Gnosticism in various Christian communities and forms. And as he explains Gnosticism, a lot of people don't realize this, but Platonism, which is a Gnosticism is a variant of Platonism,
Mm,
is a cosmology.
mm,
They don't realize this, but
mm.
that's the whole concept of the philosophy is that from the pleroma, from the heavens, pieces of wisdom break off, and then the demiurge within our realm takes those broken pieces of wisdom and tries to make a creation out of it. It is a cosmology, but
Mm.
the average person, like they're not taught that when they go to philosophy 101. They just think it's wisdom that's, how to think, what I mean? But like, no, ancient philosophy inherently included cosmology. So here we have Cyril of Jerusalem, mid fourth century, in his catechetical lecture 9, section 5. He says, "They who ought to have worshipped him, who reared the sky as a dome, who out of the fluid nature of the waters formed the stable substance of the heaven. For God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. God spoke once for all, and it stands fast and falls not."
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty clear.
Basil the Great, he says he's also mid fourth century in his Hexamerion, homily 3. He says, "One thing only, because the interior of the body presents a perfect concavity, it does not necessarily follow that its exterior surface is spherical and smoothly rounded." So he's actually combating another competing cosmology of the time where people were saying, well, maybe the firmament is just a big sphere, because that's what the Greeks taught in their cosmology, is that they're the spheres of the heavens.
Mm.
So it's kind of an ancient Zeus thing with anyway. So and there are some Christian church fathers who also tried to teach that, well, maybe the firmament is spherical shape, and it like not only is a firmament above us, but keeps going and encompasses Sheol and Tartarus below us as well. But
Mm.
Basil is trying to kind of refute that idea by
Understood.
trying to say just because it may be concave and vaulted above us doesn't mean that it's the same shape beyond that, because look at any type of architecture. Any good architect can build a vaulted ceiling, but then create other things outside of it for purpose, for other purposes. So he
Exactly.
says, look at the stone vaults of baths and the structure of buildings of cave form, the dome, which forms the interior, does not prevent the roof from having ordinarily a flat surface. So when they're actually having discussions in these homilies and in these ancient writings about, okay, so if we live in a dome firmament, how is that water still above us? How is it still up there? And Basil the Great's idea was, well, why would you just assume just because we're under a dome that the top couldn't actually be a flat surface to hold the sea above us?
Or that there's not an end that's
Right.
kind of going up and closing these
Yeah, just
vaults.
look at
Yeah.
any Gothic
Right.
building, and you'll
And
see.
what's notable here is that what's not in dispute is that there is a dome.
That's
It's
right.
just
Yeah.
taken for granted.
Yeah, they're because they're talking about the water above it and how's it held, how's it contained, right? Hey,
Hmm.
remember in Revelation 21, 2 and 3, where it says, "Saw a new heaven, new earth, and there was no more sea."
Yes.
So John is looking up at the New Jerusalem descending down, and then he says, "Oh, and there was no more sea."
So that water above has gone away somewhere.
I didn't show you this verse because we
Hmm.
didn't have time, but Testament of Levi chapter 2 describes in the second heaven there is a great suspended sea. It's
Right.
the Genesis 1 separated
Exactly. The
water that's
water's
still up there.
above.
It's
Hmm.
a great suspended sea. So if you're an astronaut trying to get through that, you better have some snorkeling gear as well.
We're gonna get there. We should probably
Yeah.
start making our way towards Artemis II here, just given our time frame. But let's power
Yeah.
through these other quotes you got.
Just got a few others real quick. This was from Ambrose of Milan, his Hexamerion, book 2, chapter 3. He was a successor of Basil. He says, he's actually talking about how people are asking about this concept. So he says, we are asked how If the firmament is a spherical body, as it appears to the eye, its convex circumference can contain the water which flows and circulates in the higher regions. So they're still trying to have a conversation about the waters above the firmament, right? And he says, what shall we answer? Well, only one thing, because the interior of the body, and this is the furthering quote that he's quoting from Basil. He goes, but he adds to it, say, look at the stone vaults of baths and structures of buildings of caves form the dome, which form the interior, does not prevent the roof from having ordinarily a flat surface. To speak of matters within our knowledge, there are a great many buildings which are round in the exterior, but are square shaped within, and vice versa. These buildings have level places on top where water usually collects. When they state again that the glittering sphere of heaven revolves with a swift motion, how they say, can water remain on a sphere when the sphere itself revolves? This is them still thinking the firmament moves. They thought the stars were the sun, moon, and stars were fixed on the firmament, and the firmament moved. And so he's having to address that. So anyway, that's where he's saying he's still trying to make a case to say, look, the waters are suspended above the firmament, and it's perfectly fine within architecture that they can see in their day. Augustine of Hippo also says, for very wonderful is this corporeal heaven, of which firmament between water and water, the second day after the creation of light.
That's pretty clear.
Right? Corporeal, right? John Chrysostom, early 5th century, he says, the text goes on, God made the firmament and divided the water which was below the firmament from the water which was above the firmament. That is to say, once the firmament existed, he ordered some of the water to go below the firmament and some to be on top of the firmament. He goes on to say in the same chapter, no sensible person would be rash enough to make a decision on it, the nature of the firmament or the waters. Instead, it's better to be quite grateful and ready to accept what is told to us and not reach beyond the limits of our own nature by meddling in matters beyond us, but rather to know only the simple fact and keep it within us, namely, is that the Lord's command, the firmament was produced, causing division of the waters, keeping some below and being able to carry the rest elevated on top of it. So, by the way, John Chrysostom is known for not over speculating about scripture and just keeping it simple.
Sure.
And these types of statements is why. He actually has a statement like where he says, I don't philosophize, I just believe what scripture says, something like that.
Sure.
So like,
sure.
He's kind of straight dry. So another guy named the venerated Bede in the 7th or 8th century, in his homily on Genesis, he says, described in these verses is the creation of our heaven in which the stars are fixed. It is established that the firmament is in the midst of the waters, for we understand that the waters were placed beneath the firmament and in the air and the land. And we are taught about the placement of these waters above it by the authority of the scripture passage and by the words of the prophets, spreading out the heaven like a tent, you cover your chamber with waters. It is an agreement then that the starry heaven was firmly set in the midst of the waters, and this does not prevent the belief that it was made from these waters. Now, he actually adds to it, not only is he acknowledging the stars are above the firmament and in water, but that they're possibly made from those waters.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, one key point which gets to, I believe he's quoting from Psalm 104 right there, Psalm 104:3, which mentions that the beams of his chambers are on the waters, right? This is visioned in the heavens. So what that tells us is that as of the writing of Psalm 104, and of course, as of Bede's writing in the 7th, 8th century, they envisioned the waters still being there.
Yes.
The firmament was still there, holding up those waters.
Yeah, and he's actually alluding to the idea that what he goes on to say, we know the great strength, purity, and transparency of the crystalline rock that was made by the congealing of the waters. So he's actually trying to teach that the firmament was made from the congealing of the waters.
Interesting.
And that's how it came to be. Which, if you understand, like, I don't know how much geology you've researched or whatever, but metals, like my wife and I are considered rock hounds. So we go into the mountains in Colorado, south of us. We live in Wyoming, but we'll cross the border into the northern Colorado mountains. We have a specific spot we go dig for crystals, because she actually has a wire wrapping jewelry business, and she sells at the gallery in our town here. And so we go dig up crystals, different types of quartz and everything. And in the ground that we dig up is all types of traces of other minerals. And a lot of people are not aware, like in the earth grows from the water and the soil grows gold and silver and copper and a whole bunch of other stuff. They say if you took the ocean water and filtered out all the gold flakes in the ocean water, that each person on earth would have 9 pounds of gold, because there's gold that's been broken up into flaky particles layered throughout the oceans.
Wow.
So the point is, he's assuming, oh, by the way, yeah, just congeal the waters and you can have a hard crystalline surface.
Okay.
So this is where, even before I knew about this guy and his musings, his theories, and his ideas on this, I had already believed Psalm 33:6, that from the breath of Yahweh he created all things, and from his voice he created all things, and from his breath all things were made. I think I'm slightly misquoting it.
That's about right. Yep.
So that's called cymatics. So you have to have a real corporeal body to breathe a real breath that becomes real substance. And then from that moisture, which is your breath, he forms and fashions all of creation.
Oh, interesting. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So this is why I believe Irenaeus is onto something in Against Heresies, book 4, when he says, from the Almighty took from his substance and created all things that we see in all creatures, giving them form, fashion, and function.
Okay.
Okay. That's why I don't agree with Trinitarians, because they're all about, oh, God has a special substance and he made everything else out of a different substance. And I'm like, no, Irenaeus believed he just straight took it from his substance, and then ex nihilo made everything from that. But not that the matter didn't exist before, but the form, function, and fashion of all purposeful things did not exist before. So yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry to cough, but
no, that's okay. That'd be an interesting tangent to explore for sure. But the key point here is just the way in which these guys, clearly hundreds of years after the of Jesus and the apostles, are still operating on this cosmology that you've already shown from the scriptures and then traced through Israelite literature.
this guy, he also is trying to say the same thing. The heaven must have a roof, so that it's holding the vaulted waters above it. It's more like a tent or a vault. He's trying to give the same description. Diodore of Taurus, 4th century, and that's really much it for that.
Great. That was great. Thank you so much for that. Well, so I think the key thing now for us would be, so with all of that in mind, what are the implications for what the modern world is telling us, right? Because again, recently there was this NASA launch, Artemis II, and they claim that they traveled through space, they circled around the moon, they came back, they have video and pictures to prove it. So, I figure maybe we could just talk about that a little bit. What do you think?
Absolutely, brother. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So here's the first thing I want to do. What I want to do is hopefully I can get my screen to work this time, y'all. Apologies for the difficulties earlier. I'm making sure I've got share sound, share screen. Looks good to me. So here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah, I see it. Artemis
Okay.
2, NASA.gov.
Here we go. So NASA, right? Artemis 2, again, the first flight to the moon in a long time. They did a 9-day, they say, lunar flyby. There's a launch video that we'll take a look at. They have lots of photos we can look at. But I think what I want to do first is just play their kind of promotional video. Where'd it go? I had it pulled up just a second ago, but I don't see it anymore. Just a second. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Start exploring multimedia. There's a video here. Here it is. So here's their promotional video for NASA 2.
This is a very serious endeavor. This is absolutely a test flight.
That'll be the first time we'll have 4 crew members seeing the far side of the moon together.
We're at the point now where we are ready to go fly.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
We've been training together for over 2.5 years now, and with that comes a closeness.
I'm driven by the spirit of exploration. There's just something about pushing the limits that really captures my passion.
This is the stuff we dreamed of when we were kids, and now it's becoming reality.
Artemis II is more than a mission to the moon and back. It is the next step on the journey that gets humanity to Mars.
All right. So the reason I wanted to play that is just because I remember when I was a kid, I was real big into space. I was real big into being an astronaut and going to these other worlds, and just seems so cool to me, and you've got that vibe that they've got going on there about it's this mission. You know, we're gonna get humanity to Mars, and they
Why?
say they're yeah, right. It's a good question, but I think a lot of people
No,
like
seriously, why? What's
Elon
their
Musk.
stated
Elon
what's their
Musk is
stated
a
goal?
yeah. Elon Musk is a big proponent of this, and he always talks about how essentially he thinks that um, humanity is going to kind of outgrow Earth in some respect. We're gonna use up our resources, or we're gonna overpopulate, or something along those lines. And so we need another place in order to guarantee our future. Is basically
So
his take.
so Yahweh says in Genesis 1 for man to subdue and fill the earth, but
Hmm.
Elon Musk says, no, that's not sustainable. We got to get off this rock.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Whose report will you believe is a good question.
Hmm.
Yeah. But my point, though, with that video was just they claim that through this they're going to circumnavigate the moon. They claim to have seen the other side of the moon,
Hmm.
right? And so what I want to do is play the launch video, look at some photos, talk about it. But before I do, is there any thoughts you wanted to share about that video I've already shared?
Yeah, it was a well done piece of propaganda.
Understood. All right, well, let's move on to the other stuff here then. So,
And Trey, just between like to let you know, yeah, as a kid, I also watched all the space movies, believed all of it, wanted to be you wanted to go to space.
mhm,
I did science fair projects about planets. I did
yeah, yeah.
a book reports, English, research papers on event horizons and wormholes, and studied relativity. Like
Mm,
on my lunch break, I'm in the library on my senior year of high school, trying to read Einstein's special relativity and general relativity, and like
nice. Yeah.
I wanted to know all of it as well. I
Yeah,
was
me
wrapped up in
too.
it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, obviously, again, just to go back to the key point we've emphasized already throughout this, but what matters the most from our perspective is Yahweh's word. Like, what does
Mhm.
Yahweh say about this, right? And if we've got other people saying things about it that contradicts Yahweh's word, then unfortunately we're gonna have to go with Yahweh's. I should say unfortunately, but you know what I mean. It's like, hey, unfortunately for you guys, sad for you guys, but we're gonna go with what Yahweh says. Um, Okay, so let's do this. This is a short video, but I want to
Okay.
play the Artemis II launch, and I want your comment on it because here's my main question. It's like the implication of all of this. Okay, so what is real? What is fake? Like, where'd the shuttle go? Are these astronauts deceiving as well? Are they complicit? Like, I'm trying to understand what the implications of all of this is when it comes to something like Artemis 2. So let's start with the launch video, and then I want you, once it's done, to comment and tell me what you think happened, what you think didn't happen, and we'll go from there.
And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7. RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great...
Good roll pitch. Roger, roll pitch.
Houston now controlling the flight of Integrity on the Artemis II mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high. AMT high.
On time, passing 30 seconds until the flights. Integrity passes the alternate beacon. Target milestone. Mission Control Houston seeing good performance on the 4 main engines. Space Launch System core stage. Integrity, 3 miles in altitude. Traveling more than 1,200 miles per hour. Altitude 8 miles downrange, traveling more than 2,600 miles per hour.
Okay, so there you have it. Artemis 2 launched into space, or did it? What do you think happened here? First of all, let's start real simple. Was there a real spaceship that launched up somewhere?
There's a real piece of metal that blasted off of a launch pad.
Yeah, okay. And what happened next?
There were multiple camera cuts, so I wish I could have been there to actually witness it myself. But they claimed at the end of that minute, we don't know because that seemed like a segmented, like edited clip of a minute long. At the end of it, they claimed it's going 2,600 miles an hour. Have you ever seen anything go 2,600 miles an hour?
I guess I was supposed to have just seen it, but other than that, no.
Okay.
Oh,
What is the average, bullet, like AR-15 bullet travels at what, like,
oh yeah, like
1,700 feet per second?
yeah,
Or-
yeah, it's pretty, yeah, something like that.
yeah. You can't see that, right?
Hmm, that's a good
That's
point.
that's not even 2,600 miles per hour. And they're supposed to get up to 17,500 miles per hour so they can do escape velocity and get into
Wait,
outside of Earth's gravity.
let me do this math with you live real quick for the sake of the audience, because I want to make sure that I'm tracking. I see where you're going. I want to make sure I'm understanding the numbers real quick. So let's see. What is the average speed of a bullet in miles per hour? Let's go with that. All right. So
So,
700 to 2,000 miles per hour is most bullets. Okay.
mhm,
And
yeah.
so you're saying they claimed that that ship, and we were all watching it travel through the air. They claimed that
Mhm.
that ship was traveling at, what did you
At
say?
the just in that little edited clip you showed from the news, the
Uh-huh.
last clip in that, as it showed it flying into the air, was going 2,600 miles an hour,
And yet we were seeing it. Is your
as
point?
if it's
Yeah.
as if
Yeah.
it's slowly going out of our sight.
Interesting. Maybe someone would say, well, it's just that big. It's, because bullets are small. But I see your point. I understand your point.
Again,
Keep
you
going.
can't see. Okay, so let's say the Saturn V or the Artemis rocket. I can't remember what they call it, but I think it's based off of a like bigger version of the Saturn V from the 1960s.
Mhm.
But let's just say that it is two 737 777s, two Boeing 777s in length,
Mhm.
which I believe it is.
Okay.
Okay. You can't see two Boeing 777s flying nose to butt in the air at going 500 miles at cruising altitude at 4,000 feet or 4,000 or 400, excuse me, 4 miles high, which would be approximately, what is that, like, 35,000 feet, right? But yet that thing, how quick can you go from ground to 35,000 feet at 2,600 miles an hour?
Ooh, good question. I'm not quick on my feet in math. Are you?
So 2,600 miles an hour,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So how fast to go 4 miles?
I'm not good with math, brother.
Think about it. So 2,600 miles an hour is beyond human sight. Speed so fast human sight can't visualize it go by. But yet this thing only has
Okay.
to
Yeah.
travel. This
Yeah.
thing, the size of 2 airplanes, only has to travel 4 miles up before we lose sight of it.
So, okay, here's the answer. 2,600 miles per hour traveling 4 miles would take 5.5 seconds.
And how long were those clips? How long are those
Mm,
launches that
right,
they can
right.
continue to see it as it starts in this strange arc instead of just shooting straight up? They say, well, it has to go in an arc because once it does escape velocity, once it reaches 17,500 miles an hour, which is how many, 8 times faster than 2,600 miles an hour?
Yeah, that's a lot. Hmm.
Okay, so not only are you watching it slowly go out of sight and get smaller and smaller, well beyond 5 seconds, we're talking 2 minutes.
Yep.
It's supposed to be rapidly increasing in speed to 8x times 2,600 miles an hour to get to escape velocity.
Mm. I see your point. I'm not educated enough about any of this to even stop,
Yep.
even steelman the other position right now. But
So
I totally get what you're saying.
the fuel within the fuel is calibrated for the weight of the aircraft, right?
Hmm.
So you need enough thrust propulsion to get the weight off the ground and then make it go fast, right? So have
Hmm.
you ever seen a smaller version rocket? You ever seen
Um,
what about the Go Fast rocket from 2014, the famous one? Did you see that one?
no. I've seen like, firework type things where you put them on the ground and
Okay.
they look like a rocket and then go up.
So universities went out and they do their own smaller sized rocket launches for testing and
Hmm.
study as a class
Hmm.
project, right?
Yeah.
And of course, they're not the size of the Artemis or the NASA rockets. We understand that, right? But proportionally, the fuel has to match the size and weight of the rocket.
Yep. Hmm.
And when those things take off, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Yep.
the thrust and propulsion doesn't just slowly just
Yeah, that's a good point.
it's you have enough thrust to get the weight proportionally off the ground, that thrust is going to push you immediately. It's not just a slow descent, a slow ascent.
Okay, so your point is what exactly? That
The math
this
doesn't add up. The
shows.
physics doesn't add up. It's
Yeah.
stagecraft. It's a show.
Okay.
They're incentivized. They're getting ridiculous. Like, what is it now? 22 billion a year to do what? To push a narrative. The narrative is, why Artemis II now? After all these years, we haven't gone back to the moon, and they still didn't technically go to the moon. They just supposedly just, looped around it. But why now? We've already sent probes to Mars. Supposedly there's still a rover running around on Mars with a miracle battery that somehow has lasted since 2011.
Yeah, just so you know, factoid here, NASA's current funding is 25 to 27 billion.
Okay, so yeah, even more than my last look up. So yeah, and they're not even landing on anything, right? They're just doing a flyby. And what's the point, right? What did they gain from that? That's a lot of money spent on that supposed mission. What did they gain from that for humanity, for any purpose whatsoever? We already know that we can send things to Mars, which is well beyond the moon. So what's the point? So the point is to keep the narrative in the news. That's the point, Trey.
Okay, understood. I hear you.
New generations need indoctrination.
Okay. So I guess another quick question, and then we'll get to some photos here. So is it your opinion then that the shuttle that we observed, because everybody watched a shuttle go somewhere, all right? So where did it go? If it didn't go through the heavens around the moon, as is being told to us, where did it go?
It went according to the arc that you saw it go in.
Okay.
What do you see? All space launches since the beginning.
Yep, kind of goes like this, and then out of sight.
Yep. So then it just lands somewhere in the ocean. They go pick it up, and they're done. It lands far outside of anyone's sight, and then they just go retrieve the remains and the people. There was never anybody in there to begin with.
Oh, that's your opinion. Is there weren't any astronauts in it?
No, there's nobody in there.
Okay, understood.
There's nobody in there.
And then, so you think then that the splashdown that was also observed was a separate event? Like it wasn't actually, the Artemis II shuttle wasn't flying around for the 9 days and then splashed down.
Yeah, four grown adults were not in a small space for 10 days that's supposedly pressurized with the toilet that barely worked, according to their testimony. And then splash down in the ocean after. By the way, if you do the math again, just like we were just talking about the high improbable nature of the rocket being able to fly out of our sight well beyond what the speed should be, right? It should have gone faster out of our sight. It went slowly out of our sight. If you do the math on the supposed reentry of the capsule that the 4 astronauts were in that splashed down in the ocean, they went from ridiculous heats to cool heats. Their trajectory and their momentum slowed down at a rate that would liquefy their organs. You ever watch Iron Man?
Yes.
Okay, so when I first saw Iron Man, I was 28 years old in theaters with a bunch of people from church, a bunch of dudes. We were like, yeah, this is amazing. And at the restaurant after the movie, I'm the dude that causes them all to be like, oh, why did you say that, Sean? You ruined the whole movie for me. Like you destroyed our suspension of disbelief. When I said to you guys know, like, none of that's possible, right? Like the moment that he hits anything or comes to a sudden stop, like his organs are liquefied. Like there's nothing in that Iron Man suit that's preventing the physics. I mean, we've all been on a roller coaster, right? You feel your guts move when you take off quickly or when you make a quick turn or whatever, right? That's physics happening, right? That's a change of momentum and shift in angle. And you're trying to tell me these people were flying down at 22,000 miles an hour and somehow slowed down in 9 seconds to get into the atmosphere at a rate of descent where a parachute could come out and not break. I don't know any parachutes that can hold a couple tons at more than 5,000 miles an hour. But you're trying to tell me that they descended from 22,000 miles an hour down to a manageable rate for a parachute to let them fall safely into the ocean within 9 seconds.
Okay.
So when you do the
I get your
research as
point.
far as the
Yeah.
reentry and all that, none of it makes any sense, brother. No, it's all stagecraft for people that don't look into it deeper, and of course for people that don't have the perspective of Scripture, which tells us that the earth was made for man, the heaven was made for the angels and God above, and we are not intended to go up there.
It's intended. God and the angels are intended to come down here.
At the end of the story, he's gonna
Yeah.
connect heaven and earth by literally putting his house down here. But we can't live up there. We can't go above the firmament and live. We can't. There is no vast distances of space. People are looking into. So remember what we talked about, the magnifying effect, right, from the firmaments.
Yep.
When you're at the top looking down through the domes, it'll greatly magnify. So what happens if you're at the bottom looking the other way?
I assume it would be the inverse.
Right.
It would minimize.
Which would make things look further away. So when we look in telescopes and we look into the quote unquote heavens and look at the stars, and we're like, man, they look so far away. And some look to be further than others. Yeah, the heaven that the stars are placed in is a large space, and I'm sure they're all just not in a line at the same altitude. I'm sure there's some closer than others, and you're already looking into a reverse magnifier that is expanding everything.
Interesting. Yeah, I get your point there. Yeah. Well, hey, one question I have just about Artemis II with all this in mind is, so you already answered one, which is you don't think that there was these astronauts that were publicized on record claiming to have been there were actually in the shuttle. So I assume that would mean then an answer to another question I have, which is, are these astronauts complicit in this lie? Or they deceived themselves? It seems to me that what you just said there would mean they are complicit. They are lying intentionally.
One of two things. Okay. So if you listen to testimony from previous astronauts, they'll say to you that they train in simulators so much for these missions that they can't tell the real thing from the fake thing. Okay. So imagine being carted with, like, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they think they're really going somewhere. And they're just put in another simulator that they think they're being carted onto a rocket, but they're just putting another simulator. And again, they can't tell the difference once they get in there. They're just following their protocols. They're just following their itineraries. They're just hitting the buttons they're supposed to hit. They're looking at the readings they're supposed to read out, but it's just another simulator that is made a little bit more real. It's got real chairs, real texture, whatever, it's just another simulator. That's super easy to deceive them. Personally, though, I think that a lot of these, if you look at some of the other furthering testimonies of people that interviewed astronauts and asked them about details of their trips, the stories don't line up.
Okay. Understood.
So there's, without going into a whole nother segment, there are people that have gone to function like NASA functions where you can meet and greet astronauts, right? And they'll say, okay, so these astronauts are supposedly just went on the ISS for 2 months and they were doing this and that, and they were supposed to be doing some sort of research project up there, growing lettuce or whatever they claim. They've grown lettuce, by the way, like 3 different times since the 90s. They just keep recycling that news story. It's like, okay, you already grew lettuce. Who cares, man? Like, it's fine. Grow something else. Like, what are you doing up there all day? And by the way, have you ever seen the ISS? No engineer in his right mind would leave all those wires just floating around. Like, it would be, it would be like a submarine. It would be super smooth panels that you open up panels and fix wires. Like, everything would be tidy, put away. That's the dumbest design in the world. This the ISS. But people have went up and asked questions to these astronauts about their supposed missions, and they don't remember the pertinent details. Because I do believe that the redacted and the files that have been released to the public for things like Operation Montauk and the CIA files for Operation the concepts that the CIA has been venturing into, and the secret, the secret things within the government to where they brainwash people. I believe that they can brainwash people.
Okay.
So have you ever seen a hypnotist brainwash someone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, never live. I mean, I'm familiar with the fact that it has happened. It's verifiable that they can do it.
Okay. So my brother was hypnotized one time in a public show. The guy told him you're my brother, okay, which is like shorter than me, um, you know, kind of a reserved guy. Well, I mean, the point is, the hypnotist had him thinking he was an actual rock star in an 80s band, giving a performance in front of the crowd.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was not my brother anymore.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? Like, I
Yes,
wouldn't have
yes.
recognized that person had I known it was my brother. I would not have thought like that my brother would ever, I mean, he's up there grabbing his crotch and putting his tongue out and screaming and act like there's no music playing. He thinks he's hearing a band playing behind him. Like, hypnotism is a real thing. It's a dark art and it's real.
Interesting.
And so I've many years ago was actually pulled onto stage for a hypnotist show, and the guy like didn't mess with me because it wasn't working on me. But the people next to me, were convinced that someone came up and put their hands on their shoulders and their back. But I was watching them. There was nobody standing there, and they were telling me who was the guy that came up to me and put their hands on my back and touched me at this time in the show. And I was like, there was nobody there. You were hypnotized.
Right. And so your point is that this could be not necessarily hypnotism, but there could be something going on psychologically for these astronauts.
No, I'm suggesting brainwashing, hypnotism. If these people aren't directly lying, and there's very valid, noble reasons these people could be lied to participate in the deception, right?
Sure.
So I'm suggesting first and foremost, these astronauts are brainwashed. That's why they all have a weird look in their eye. None of them seem to be literally fit for being an astronaut physically. You ever think about that? I don't know if you've ever.
I've not thought about that, but you know what? Just for the sake of your point, let me just go ahead and do this. Let me share because they have a whole page where it's just who the people are. Let me get back to that here in just a second. Our Artemis crew. 4 astronauts. Meet the crew. These are the folks here.
Mm-hmm.
And so your point again is just.
Yeah, when you see these people in their polos floating around, they may be thin. Some of them are not even thin, but they may be thin, but they're not in shape. It doesn't look like these people have any kind of PT to prepare them for any type of strenuous thing at all.
Okay.
So
which is what would be required if they're going to be a part of a
suspect.
mission like that, right?
Yeah, you would suspect. But what I just suggest is that we do if they're not hypnotized, how would you get to someone to participate in this type of lie? Easy. Threaten threats of various kinds, threats to harm to themselves or their loved ones. Or more than importantly, you don't do any of that. You just bring them into the bigger secret. All of it's a lie, but here's what they say to them. They just bring them into, hey, by the way, you want to help, you want to save the world? Here's how you can do that. We need you to be a spokesperson for this because aliens are coming and we need the funding to develop the technology to be able to withstand them when they get here, or they're already here. You've seen the news. You know they're doing disclosure right now. And they have to perpetrate the whole narrative. So the Artemis is just a flash in the pan compared to the overall space program, which is the narrative that you're on a ball in space and that your alien progenitors are coming back. This is called panspermia. This is taught in mainstream science. Have you ever heard of that before?
Never heard of that term. No.
So it's the idea that life was seeded on the earth through an evolutionary framework. Heliocentrism within evolutionary framework, that life was seeded on the earth by a higher intelligence, a progenitor of mankind. Basically, it's a humanoid from 4,000 years ago that had advanced to higher knowledge and left the earth and seeded the earth and is going to come back at some point and see how we're doing.
I have heard of that idea, yes.
Yeah, it's called panspermia. And and they're still pushing it. NASA, people from NASA are still pushing it. They're still pushing the idea that, when we make contact with aliens, they just may be us from the ancient past, a more sophisticated version of us, and so they're continuing to push this. I personally think that it's going to be the revelation of reintroducing the world to Zeus, which is the ancient, if you understand the ancient world. So remember in Matthew 4 and Luke 4, when Satan shows himself to Jesus and tempts him, would you agree that that's actually the Rebbeus angel Azazel, Satan?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so some people don't. Some people think it's just a man that's just given the name Hasatan as a moniker for the enemy.
Right.
But yet Hasatan is doing some stuff with Jesus that the average man can't seem to do.
For
Right?
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why in the third temptation, the angels have to come minister to Christ after Satan flees from him from that high mountain. Right? That very high mountain that can somehow see all the kingdoms of the
See
world
all
in
the
a
kingdoms of
glance.
the world. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's hard to do in a ball. Anyway,
It's
so
impossible to do in a ball.
right. So basically, the ancient world was full of Zeus worship. Also in India, it was it's full of Brahma worship, which is the Indian equivalent to Zeus.
Okay.
Okay, and the within the unholy trinity, if you will, you'd have Zeus, Apollo, or Apollyon, the Latin transliteration, or Helios to the Greeks. So if we're sticking with the Greek words, Zeus, Helios, and then they would have Hermes.
Okay.
Okay. So the Egyptians had Ra, Osiris, and Anubis.
Iris, right? Oh, Anubis. Okay.
Okay. The Indians, they had Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, or Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Okay.
Okay.
So, and of course, Zeus, I don't know, in case you're not aware of this, the early depiction of Zeus in the ancient Greeks was his avatar was a serpent.
You mentioned this in your Investigating Babylon
Yeah.
series. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have many avatars, and that's why it's so consistent with Ra. He's the serpent that encircles the sun disk, and then Brahma is also the ancient god floating on the lotus in the sky. That's the serpent god. Okay, so that's the main pantheon gods of these. But they were known to appear to people. They were known to interact with people. It's recorded in the scriptures that Satan appears to Jesus. That we're told he's a roaming lion going up and down the earth. Job 1 and 2. First Peter, roaming throughout the earth, seeking who may devour, right? Satan, dragon of old, Revelation 12 and 20. Like we know who this character is, okay? And I think what happened with Christ is, I'm trying to make this brief to get back to Artemis. I think
That's
what
okay.
happened with
Take your
Christ
time.
is when Christ, overcame heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights, resurrected, glorified, ascended back to heaven to his position of priesthood. Now he's over the ecclesia, giving out the gifts of the Holy Spirit as he chooses. He started a war against Satan's kingdoms to, like he says, I come to destroy the works of the devil.
Right.
And that's when systematically you start seeing pagan worship start to go underground in a lot of
Right.
dominant nations, which is why today there's still temples in India and China and Japan to false gods. But the majority of the world, the occult is underground, that they're occulted now. By definition, they're
They're
occulted.
the occult now, not the norm.
They're not a temple in every corner to a false god underneath the pagan pantheon of Zeus or Ra worship. Now they're occulted. So that happened systematically in the first 300-400 years of the church, springing forth after the persecutions from the Roman emperors.
Okay.
And it's like it's as if Christ was destroying the works of the devil and is constantly destroying the works of the devil, right? Because he's supremacy over the church. With that said, it is prophesied, though, at the end, you're going to have what seems to be, in Revelation 13 says the dragon, like the world wonders after the dragon. So, and then the dragon gives his authority to the first beast, who's called the Apollyon, who then goes out and persecutes the nations and has the authority for 42 months to speak blasphemies against the tabernacle in heaven. The tabernacle in heaven, by the way.
The tabernacle in heaven.
What happens in a tabernacle with priests? But anyway, that's another discussion. So basically, like that's Revelation 13, 1 through 10. Okay. I think the world, and this is what we talk about our channel, I think the world is being prepped for a reintroduction to what they used to call Zeus. He's going to be reintroduced in this new heliocentric space narrative to be our alien progenitor. He's come back to help us with cancer. He's come back to help us with disease. He's come back to help us with famine. He's gonna be reintroduced, and he's gonna warn us about the bad aliens out there that we need to be prepared for, which is just convincing the nations of the world to try to fight Christ as is coming.
Wow, I see the story, and I understand why you think it, and it makes sense. So just a quick clarifying question on that. So are you saying then that the so-called Antichrist of infamous theologies, that's actually not a human, that's like a divine being?
So Apollyon comes up out of the pit in Revelation 9:11. Humans don't come out of pits from the earth.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because the classic, like, Left Behind series story is that
Yeah.
it's a human. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just a slick politician. No. The First John tells us there are many antichrists already in the world, right? These are just people that are against the agenda of God through the church, through the authority of Christ, who disbelieve and try to get people to not believe that Christ lived, died, resurrected, and is the Son of God. There are many antichrists in the earth, but specifically the beast of Revelation.
The beast of Revelation 13, right?
Yeah, he's called Apollyon in Revelation 11.
Okay.
That's historically the Greeks knew who Apollyon was, and there's these things that are with Apollyon. It says that he is king over these locusts, these things that come up out of the pit with him. Apollyon in the ancient Greek world was called the king of the locusts.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so your point is you view the deception that's going on through NASA and organizations like it as gearing humans up for the reemergence of these divine beings to deceive the world as prophesied in Revelation.
Yeah. So there was a yes, and the little slightly longer answer is in the early 20th century, the Theosophist Society, kind of most commonly known to be one of the mouthpieces for that was a lady named Helen Blavatsky, and also the Lucius Trust, who was a part of the League of Nations and then some of the early counselors to the United Nations. They basically the Theosophist Society, which is occultic devil worshippers, like they've announced that they have a systematic plan specifically for America to destroy Christianity in America. And we've already enacted like 9 out of 10 points in the plan at this point in history, which is pretty crazy, with all the sex and divorce and atheism. But the whole point was to prepare the way for what they call the externalization of the hierarchy. And that is the revealing of taking the occult out from the underground and back into the streets again, to where it's commonly accepted and they can have open worship to gods again and get back to where they used to have what they enjoyed in the ancient world as dominance. To, it was Paul walks in there and it's like, look at all these gods, and you got this unknown God over here. Like, look at all these, you're worshiping all these things, but what's going on here? Standing, at the temple of Athena and the ancient world, like it was temples to false gods everywhere, no matter which culture you went to.
Right.
So they want that again, and they
I
have
see.
a plan to achieve that again. So instead of like nowadays, in case people don't know this, the depictions of Molech, which is like a variant of Baal, depends on like which time period in history you're looking at. It could be a bull, it could be an owl, but that's literally the Planned Parenthood logo is an owl. It's Molech. So Molech worship, I mean, you probably heard of Bohemian Grove, the whole
Yes.
leaders.
Yeah, Alex
leaders of
Jones
the
and
nations.
Bohemian Grove.
Yeah,
Yep.
worshiping a big effigy to a big statue of a owl. So did you know that United Nations, the meditation room in the United Nations, has a picture of an owl in front of a
I did
stone
not know
altar?
that. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a stone altar in the United Nations meditation room, and there's a painting in there. It's an artistic painting of an owl.
Wow. I got to look this up, see if it's publicly available to see real quick.
Yeah.
United Nations meditation room. Here we go. Images. Come on, give me that owl statue. I want to see it.
It's not a statue. It's an artistic painting.
Or an image.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is, why is there a stone altar in the meditation room of the United Nations?
Yeah, with an owl. Why? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not seeing it on a quick search, but I'll take you at your word.
I've done a video on it. It's one of my top videos on my channel.
Nice.
So it's like a 3-minute video, but yeah, the point is there's the occult that does run the world. They do worship Satan. This is known. Revelation 12, Satan who deceives the whole world. Okay. That's the same Satan that attacks those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus Christ. Revelation 12:17. That's the same Satan who is removed from the heaven. And it says, woe unto the earth and also inhabitants, for Satan has come down to you and he's full of fury and wrath. Okay. So we're told in Ephesians 6 that the cosmos, the powers of the heaven, is where these principalities and authorities are. that are evil, that we're in a spiritual war with, right? And that word in the Hebrew or in the Greek is the cosmos kratos, which is the sublunary world between the earth and the moon.
Okay.
Okay. That's where Satan and the demons reside.
Interesting you say
So-
that. And this was going to be a question I asked you, if you don't mind me jumping in real quick.
Sure.
Because we can see the moon. Nobody
Yeah.
disputes this. We can see the moon.
Yeah, and you can
But
also see waves going across the front of it too.
I've seen you highlight that. And I'm going to pull up a couple photos of the moon. Number one, I'm going to pull up NASA's Artemis II lunar flyby photos of the moon.
Mhm.
Then I'm going to pull up a photo I took of the moon. And we're going to talk about that. But my question for you is, why can't we see these beings? Because in your account, they are physical beings. And they are in that space. And we can see the moon, but we can't see them.
Yeah. For the same reason all the people see the UAP sightings that just suddenly disappear.
Oh, so you would say that those are that they have been seen, and that's what those are. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can share something real quick with you if you
Go
like.
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Okay, just give me 1 second here. Okay.
See this.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, take your time. I see we got some people in the chat. Lots of comments. Everybody, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Yeah, please do share that meditation room photo or video there. I'd like to see that.
This is something a little bit more interesting.
Oh, I was talking to the guys in the chat that
Oh,
were talking
okay.
about it. But go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So this depiction here is an AI rendering of this text from the Sanskrit Vedic text from ancient India.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
The terribly tormented by the airships of Saba, Lord Krishna's city had no peace. O king, just like the earth when it was attacked by the three aerial cities of the demons.
Aerial cities of the demons. Wow.
This is, I got the text from the Bhagavad Gita cited at below. So what I did is I took the descriptions of these vamanas, these aerial cities in the ancient text, put them into Grok and said, make me a picture.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it put up. This is another picture here of ancient India talking about the gods who showed up from their vamanas in the sky. And they'd been living in the sky for a long time. Here's another picture from one of their vamanas. An airship appeared in identical forms, and the next minute it was gone. It was only one again. Sometimes it was visible, and sometimes it was not visible. The Salva's opponents can never be sure where it was. This is
that sounds like UAPs, recent UAPs that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is another depiction from the ancient text in ancient India. Looks just like a saucer, just a little bit more complicated.
Sure.
The aero car shining like the sun with colorful parts made of gold. The platform made of cat's eye gems, full of attics shown like silver on all sides, decorated with white flags and flat staffs, decked with gold and golden lotuses. The golden lotuses was attributed to Brahma. I mean, these are just described with great depth. It says at the bottom here, it resembled a mountain and which could travel everywhere at will and arrived on that occasion.
Okay. Yeah.
This is another text.
Yeah, please
talks about
continue.
vamanas. So the idea of the vamana, though, if you look up, have you ever studied vamanas?
I remember you talking about it a little bit in one of the videos I saw of your Investigating Babylon series, but nothing more than that.
Do you remember where it talks about this one here? It says, strong and durable must be the body of the vamana be made, like a great flying bird of light material. Inside, one must put the mercury engine with its iron heating apparatus underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the latent power in the mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man can sit inside and travel a great distance in the sky. The movements of the vamana are such that it can vertically ascend, vertically descend, and move slanting forwards and backwards. This is from an ancient text, brother.
Mm-hmm. Very ancient.
And by the way, it also, this is another depiction of another vamana that descended from the sky to talk with somebody. The rulers inside of it were inside the vehicle to talk with somebody.
Right.
It's just this is a Roman account of seeing flying vimanas in the sky during the battle of Hadrian's battle of I can't remember the exact battle, but this is from a Roman account from Livy, the historian Livy, who's highly accredited historian from ancient Rome. He talks about people seeing vimanas in the sky, and they thought it was an evil omen. So the point of what I'm saying is, have you ever look up right now? Look up. Maybe I could do it for you. Just look up vimana, and you'll see like a triangle shaped vimana.
Okay. Yeah, I think I see it. It kind of looks like a ziggurat.
And let me see here. They had different types of vimanas, different shapes to them, and some of them.
Are you sharing, or do you want me to share? Because I can share what I'm seeing.
I'm going to share in just a minute. I'm just going to find this
go
real
ahead.
quick. Okay.
Yep.
So here, someone's already, I used to make a bunch of these pictures in the past, but someone's already made one. So I'll share this real quick.
Yeah, please.
Now, because we're talking about NASA, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're talking about NASA.
Right. Did you know that a lot of people like to say, well, NASA in the Hebrew means deceive, but technically with the S and the SH, Nasha, it means to deceive, but Nasa means to lift up, right? So
yes, I've heard this.
Yeah, it's not exactly a great explanation, but if you actually understand ancient Vedic, the ancient Vedic language, NASA, NASA meant destruction. So look at this real quick.
Yeah,
can you see that?
Yeah, like I said, kind of looks like a ziggurat there. And that's the same, general shape there of the NASA shuttles. Yeah.
So with just specifically the tip of the rocket that comes back down, right? Now, when you say shuttle, because I'm a little bit older than you, I actually remember the shuttle from the 80s, which was an actual airplane with a big hull.
Right.
Right. The actual space shuttle that they retired in like the early mid 90s or something like that, or 2007. I can't remember when they retired it, but now it's just putting people in a small capsule at the end of a rocket and shooting them up. And then that capsule comes back down with parachutes. But the capsule just conveniently looks exactly like a vimana.
Huh.
And by the way, and see the tubes at the top of the vimana. Once the little go to the splashdown for the Artemis II and look at what it looks like.
Okay, I'm trying to pull that up here.
Released all of its once it's released all of its little airbags and parachutes.
See if I can find this. Artemis II. Splashdown. Here we go. I don't know if this is correct, but yeah, I'm looking at a picture, and again, yeah, it looks like the shuttle you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, so they just they pull out these buoyancy things at the top of it, which just mimics a vimana even more. Once the little the buoyancy balls inflate at the top of it. Is this just a coincidence that they just shaped this thing exactly? Like, think about this for a minute, brother. The rest of the rocket is not aerodynamic. Okay. You could with that much fuel inside these things with the stage boosters and everything involved.
Yeah.
You could shoot up a square brick and still go just as fast. Because remember, you're going 17,500 miles an hour. Okay. Wind resistance doesn't matter when you got that much power. So, and of course, you're not going to need wind resistant aerodynamics in space, according to the story. There's no wind resistance in space. There's no atmosphere.
Right.
So again, why specifically are they, and why not just make a bigger compartment for these guys to be in? Why have it in this very limiting shape? It doesn't make any sense on a variety of engineering reasons, a variety of like the power revolved, all the things. It just doesn't make any sense. It is a chosen shape is what I'm getting at.
It is a chosen shape. You can't dispute that for sure. They chose it for a reason. The only question is why. Right. And of course, I understand the connection you're making there.
So when you read the ancient stories from the Vedic text about the vimanas, it describes them directly as the mercury engine that creates the combustion, which causes a bright flame to go out from below in a tremendous sound of rocket din. They call it a tremendous din, din, which is a burst of fire and light produced from the bottom of the vimana that pushes it up into the sky.
Are you telling me they had rockets?
I'm telling you, not only they have rockets, they had hovering, levitating pushpakas. A pushpaka was an entire city that could hold 3,000 to 4,000 people at one time, according to their writings. And I just showed you a writing. I just showed you a writing where they said, "Oh, there was a time in the past when we had 3 aerial cities of demons attack us."
So what this
So
is this is doing in my mind,
demons are in the air above us.
it does say that. The Bible says that explicitly, right? The power of the air. Powers in the air, they talk about that.
Specifically in the Greek, in the Cosmos Kratos, which is the power of the. So remember in Revelation 12 and 7 through 10, where it says Michael and his angels fought against the devil and his angels, and the devil and his angels lost, and there was no place found for them.
Yes.
And then it says they were descended from heaven. Let's read the text real quick.
Yeah, Revelation 12, right? You want me to share it or you?
Sure, you can share it if you like.
All right, let's do it. Revelation 12 here.
Okay, so there's a Revelation 12 verse 7. A war broke out in heaven. Okay, so now that we got a definition of heaven, where is this war taking place?
That's a good question, and it is singular. So we're talking about in one of those open spaces between the firmaments, right?
So here's where the previous texts help us. Okay.
Yeah.
I would point to Ephesians 6, 10 through 12, where Paul directly tells you that they're in the sublunary world between the earth and the moon. It's called the Cosmos Kratos. You have to look into the Greek.
Right. Yes.
Spiritual forces
in the heavenly places or in the heavenlies. Yes.
Yeah, but they're not above the firmament where the abode of the angels are, because they can't go up there. According to the narrative, Satan can't live up there anymore. And demons definitely can't go up there.
Okay.
So where are they? They're in the heavenly realm. Well, there's another place called the heavenly realms called the open firmament, and it's high above us. There is a large space between us and the firmament. I mean, it's a tall, like, I can't remember the exact verse right now. I think it's in Jeremiah 33 that talks about that man cannot measure the heights of the heaven, just like man cannot measure the breadth of the earth. Right. So but yet scientists tell us that they know the diameter and the radius of the earth, don't they?
Indeed they do.
And they tell us that they know the distant galaxies and how far they are, and they can be measured through light years. Okay, but here the Bible's telling us where Satan is and where his messengers are, these unclean spirits. And then now in Revelation 12, well, there's a fight that breaks out, and Michael and his angels fights against the dragon and his angels, his messengers.
Yep.
And there it says the dragon was not strong enough, and it was no longer any place found in heaven for him and his angels. And the great dragon was hurled down.
Yep.
Was hurled down. And that's why it says, I heard a loud voice saying, it says, the deceiver of the whole world, he was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. So
to the earth.
To the earth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that he is, he goes on in verse 12 to say, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to the earth and to the sea with great fury. The devils come down to you, knowing he only has a short time. So that means the devil's not down here right now.
This is future in your view. This is something that's being prophesied by the vision. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
I believe that this is actually taking place. This battle is taking place 42 months before Christ returns. It kicks off the 42 months of tribulation. It is the Daniel 12:1, the time when Michael rises on behalf of his people. That word rises in the Hebrew is a military term, rises in military battle. And this is the battle I think that we're seeing, is that Satan is literally removed from his place in the sky where he's been hanging out, hiding from mankind. And he's forced to come down, and because it says no longer any place is found for him in the heaven. And he's not living above the firmament with the angels. First thing it tells you, he's kicked out of heaven. He can't go back. He can't live back there again. right? This is why Jude talks about they had left their first habitation. They can't go back. They can't live back there again. That's so they were, even the rebellious angels that were locked in Tartarus before the flood had to stay on the earth until they were finally locked up. And they had to wait and watch their children, their Nephilim children, kill each other in a civil war before that happened. So they couldn't return back to heaven. They had to stay on the earth amongst man and amongst their Nephilim children to watch the consequences of their actions play out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were taken to Tartarus. So the point is, Satan was, specifically Azazel, was not included in that lot that was taken to Tartarus, according to Enoch and Jubilees. And that's why he's still on the earth, deceiving man and considered the roaring lion, the great dragon of old. That's why he's still out, right? That's why only at the second coming is he locked in the earth for 1,000 years. So the point is, where's he been in the meantime is the idea.
Yes. Right. Where has he been in the meantime, Sean?
Okay. So the point is, how you've got the whole NASA program, the homage to a stagecraft to fool the people, but they're also claiming something that's physically impossible according to Scripture. They're claiming that there is no firmament, and that they can just go anywhere into a different cosmology, a different creation model than what Yahweh described. But there comes a time when Michael is sent to kick Satan out of his abode in the heaven and has to come down to the earth again. So this is where just like I showed you ancient text from ancient India, which directly talks about how demons had crafts that flew in the sky, that could cloak themselves, be visible at one point, invisible at another point, that could move with super speeds, that moved and had crafts shaped just like UAPs we see today, that literally attacked cities at different times. That this is not, there's, Ecclesiastes 1:9 is abundantly true. There's nothing new under the sun.
This is really interesting because it's reminding me of Graham Hancock's content on the Joe Rogan Experience. He talks about, he has his own books and his own documentary now, but his basic thesis across all his work is that there was an ancient civilization that was far more advanced than we probably can even conceive of. And it was wiped out at a certain point in time by global cataclysm. And yeah, so that's kind of an interesting overlap to what you're saying, is that, in your view, is something that's probably going to happen again in the future. Those kinds of beings are going to come back in the future, and we're going to see those kinds of things happening again.
I believe it's going to be more ramped up stagecraft to deceive mankind, right? This is why Revelation 12 says this is the dragon who deceives the whole world. Okay. So they're going to, in my understanding, they already have been reintroducing vmanas, which they've hidden that technology for a long time. They literally have documented writings about it. By the way, did you know that
Bob Lazar, right? Is that his name? Bob something or other. He has this whole Lazar. He has this whole documentary about UFOs and his testimony to that.
Yep. It claims he went in one and he got to work on one for 6 months or whatever, and the whole testimony there. Trey, I wouldn't be surprised in 5 or 10 years if literally the alien disclosure is fully out in the open and they're like, oh yeah, it's real. We have, somewhere in Washington D.C., they set up a whole, park specifically with a UAP there that people can go tour and walk inside of it and look and touch it and see the advancedness of it and all that and be like, oh my gosh, it's real. Because they need to sell this to people. They need to get, and it is real. It's been in the past. It's just a vimana. They've had these forever. I've got testimony like from the ancient records that I've shown in multiple videos on my channel from the Romans, the Egyptians, the Persians, the Indians, all talking about these things and how they were privileged to be given them by the gods who descended from heaven and taught them how to fly in these things. I've got the quotes. Like, I don't know if you've seen all my videos, but we've talked about this in great depth for years. So like, this is just, it's all been done before. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything that has been will be again. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just an old lie repackaged. And they have to get people to believe the narrative of, okay, these advanced things can come down from space, because they don't want people to believe in the firmament because that's just too obvious. So even in the ancient days, by the way, the ancient cultures, they taught about a firmament, like the Mesopotamians, the Akkadians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, that, they all believed they didn't believe in an actual heliocentric cosmology, regardless of what people will try to say. They'll try to say, oh, sticks and shadows, Eratosthenes, he had a well in Alexandria and another well 500 miles away, and that's how he knew the Earth was a sphere. That there's no historical validation to that story. It's repeated a lot. The ancient world, what is validated in historical records is all the ancient cultures talked about a firmament of some sort. The Egyptians even gave it a god status. They even personified it as a god, the god Nut. It is the female goddess who encompasses the earth as a physical structure made of water.
Interesting. Wow.
It's the god Nut. Look up the god Nut in Egyptian mythology, right? So like the ancient world, they just described it differently than the Hebrews, but they all believed that, because remember, they're all descendants from Noah. They all came away from the Tower of Babel with pieces of information, teaching their people, even though they were already worshiping the false god Zeus or Jupiter, by technical name Zeus, even though Josephus records it as Jupiter Inyalius, which is like a later Roman adaptation of Zeus. But they were already worshiping Zeus at the Tower of Babel, and they dispersed with new languages, taking pieces of what they knew, and now they're still talking about the same cosmology, though. And that same cosmology was you're enclosed by some kind of structure. So what the Egyptians talked about as far as Satan, Ra, is they would say that because of this rebellion that happened on the earth, Ra no longer wanted to live on the earth amongst mankind. Instead, he had his demon architect build him a house connected to the firmament in the sky.
That sounds familiar.
It's literally a book from the 18th century BC dynasty of ancient Egypt called the Book of the Heavenly Cow. And it details how Ra decided to go live in the sky in this special house that was built for him by this, by his special engineer architect. And that's where he stayed because he didn't want to be around mankind anymore.
Interesting. Wow.
And of course, you may already know that he also is said to have a craft that flew in the sky and chased the sun and that kind of thing. And yeah, that's what they considered him, the sun god.
It is so fascinating that just, recently in America, we've had these discussions about UAPs, UFOs, these unidentified objects that seem to have technological advancement beyond even our own capabilities today. So this is all very interesting, and I appreciate you going down these rabbit trails with me. And I guess the only thing left that I want to do with you before we go ahead and wrap up the show today is to talk about specifically the moon, because obviously Artemis II was about flying to and then around the moon and coming back. And like I said, they have their own photos, and I took a photo of the moon myself, and I want to talk about that with you, just get your perspective on what is true, what is being misrepresented, what can we see, what aren't we seeing that's just being made up. So let me go ahead and pull that up real quick. So first, let's start with Artemis II. This is what they claim to have seen, right? They claim to have flown around to the dark side of the moon, and so we're looking at, from the back side of the moon, we're looking at the Earth there in the distance. That globish structure.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've already talked about how that's not what is the case according to the Bible. Here's another photo of the moon. So that's what they say they saw. Now check out this. I actually visited a guy back in January, I think it was, who he set up this big telescope on the top of a building, and he started pointing it just at various objects in the sky. And he said, "Hey, take your phone and put your camera up to the lens here and take a photo and see what happens." And so I did it. First of all, I looked into the focal point there, and I looked and I could see the moon. And then I took my phone and I took a photo. And this is what I saw. You seeing that?
No. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
This is what I saw, and this is the photo that actually my phone up to his telescope.
Yep.
After I had personally looked at it myself and then took my phone and put it up to the telescope, this is what it looked like. And
so would he have like a 10-inch telescope?
Couldn't tell you the details. He just had this big. It was tall. It was probably a couple of feet taller than myself when I was there. And I'm almost 6 feet. But
was it digital or optical magnification?
He said it was optical. He explained it. It was not digital. It was like mirrors.
Supposedly optical is better to get you a better. like a truer picture
Yeah.
when you zoom in. Yeah.
So my question is just like, given everything we've talked about and Artemis II, they have their photos, and there's a
Mhm.
photo I took myself, and I looked into the telescope myself, and like, what's the truth here? Like, am I seeing the moon? Like, is that really the moon? Is that really what it looks like? Did he make
Or
that up? Like, what's going on here?
why is your picture from the Earth literally the same as their picture supposedly close to it?
Oh,
Is that
interesting
what you're
question.
asking?
I'm trying to. Well, I'm just hoping you could explain to me. So they have these photos of the moon that they took, right? And I took that photo of the moon. So my first question would be, do you think that photo I took of the moon is actually looking at the object that is there that God created, the lesser light?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're just looking through firmaments and through clear water.
Hmm.
Mhm. From your
Okay.
perspective, seeing the light of the moon shining through that clear water to look at the firmament beyond the water or in the water. I tend to
Hmm.
think in the water personally because I could be wrong, but I tend to think the moon is in the second layer of the firmament, but it could still be in the third, in the same one that the sun is. But the point is, you're looking through clear as glass, like in Exodus 24:10, it talks about the heaven being as the firmament that they saw the feet of God standing on was as clear as the heaven, because the heaven is absolutely clear, right?
Okay.
It's completely see through, right? Same
Got
thing
it.
like in the piece of firmament that the mobile throne described in Ezekiel 1 and chapter 8 and chapter 10 of Yahweh and these angels that are carrying him is this clear piece of firmament. So you're staring straight through that at the luminary of the moon, and you're supposedly in a heliocentric model, you would be 238,000 miles away from it, and you got that picture. So, what kind of camera or even telescope can zoom in 238,000 miles away?
Yeah, that's a pretty good photo for that far away. Yeah.
And why is that photo almost identical to supposedly them being what, 1,000 miles away from it as they encircled it, as they looped
Mm,
around it?
mm, mhm, mhm, mhm,
How come there's no difference in detail? How come there's no difference in perspective?
mm, mm. Good question. Yeah. Okay. So you do think that the photo that I shared that I took with my phone through the telescope that he shared, you do think it's real, or you don't? I'm
The
trying to
picture that
understand.
you showed me looks like a real picture of the photo of the moon from
Okay.
other people I know who are amateur photographers with large telescopic 10-inch lenses that take photos of the moon.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Understood. My last question for you, Sean, and feel free if you want to say any closing comments after you respond to this question. If you had more to share, you want to say more about Artemis II or the larger topic of biblical cosmology, feel free. But my last question for you is, because you've talked about how these firmaments that God created are big, they're vast. There's a lot of space
Mm,
in these firmaments.
yeah.
And so my question for you is it is it possible that there is space to kind of cohere the modern cosmology and the biblical cosmology in this sense, that
Yeah.
there is that vast space out there because these firmaments are so big, and um maybe we're just traveling in those firmaments somehow. I don't know. Like, I understand that there's going to be points at which the things that you shared, you would close the door on that. But my question is, just because you shared how big these firmaments, the spaces in between these firmaments are, I wonder if that there's some room there to kind of bring these two views together.
Yeah. I'll go to the scriptures if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead. While you're doing that, I see a question in the live chat here. Jeremy Cush said, "Trey, do you think that the image you took of the moon was of the actual moon?" I mean, I don't have any reason to think it wasn't. He had a telescope set up. I could see the moon in the sky. I could see him pointing the telescope toward the moon. I looked into the telescope myself, and I'm looking at the moon, and it looked like what. Then I took my phone and put the camera up to the telescope and took that photo. So I don't have any reason to think it wasn't. That's my answer to your question there, Jeremy. But go
So in
ahead.
John 3, 12 and 13, if I had told you about earthly things and you don't believe, how will you believe if I tell you about heavenly things? No one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of
Oh,
Man.
oh, there it is. No one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man.
So I think God's word is true and Satan is a liar. That's what I think.
Interesting.
I think all of these missions have names to false gods: Artemis, Apollo, Orion. Like, they're all to false gods, Egyptian and Greek false gods, which is Zeus worship, Ra worship. They literally have crafts that look like ancient vmanas. With they have rockets, which also ancient India described as a different type of vimana that flew in the air with a tremendous din of fire exiting its bottom. They purport, all of it supports the narrative of higher beings with greater power and intelligence that will visit us to bring us gifts that we need to survive, which is literally the story of the ancient gods' interaction with the ancient cultures. It's just there's nothing new under the sun, brother.
I hear you.
Listen, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
Not going around it, not traveling from Alpha Centauri at 4 million light years away. There's nothing new under the sun.
That is a brilliant way to land this plane on the discussion that we've had. Sean, thank you so much for this. This has been really good. I really appreciate you joining me to talk about this. You've given me a lot of food for thought. You've given the audience a lot of food for thought. Everyone who's joined, thank you. I've seen your chats just pouring through. I haven't really had time to kind of read these comments in depth that they deserve because I've been trying to learn with and from Sean. But yeah, Sean, unless there's anything you wanted to share here as kind of closing thoughts, recommended resources, anything like that, that's all I really had to ask you and talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if people are more interested in some of the stuff we tease, because I mentioned a lot of things in summary fashion for the sake of the conversation, but we do like literally hundreds of hours of videos on these types of topics with our Investigating Babylon series and our 42 series. So there's two different playlists on our channel, Investigating Babylon and 42 series, and I go over all the stuff we talked about in great depth with large videos specifically dedicated to the history of the gods, how they deceive mankind, how it doesn't line up with Scripture. And my goal is that you won't be deceived by what's coming.
Good stuff, Sean. And of course, your Uncommon Ground series with Wes Blaze, right?
That also on Wes Blaze Music channel. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Well, Sean, with that being said, thank you for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and close us out here with the Theology Experience song. Once again, thank you so much, everyone who joined. May Yahweh take note and listen as we speak to one another on the Theology Experience.
Bless you. Thank you, Trey.
Bye-bye.
The Theology Experience. Transform our perspectives. Father, bless our work and all of those affected. We see the difference with the righteous and wicked, between the one who serves God and he who's not submitted. The experience. The theology experience. Theology. The theology. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain listen as we speak to one another.